Oh, you missed the opportunity to put the like ring.
I know. I'm not on top of my game today. Would have been better.
That would have been hilarious. Let me open the stream. Actually, I don't know. Maybe looking at Twitch chat's a helpful thing. I'm not sure.
Where is your background a picture of?
I don't know. This is a stock photo that comes with my green screen software. Judging by the trees, I'm gonna say California.
It looks like Southern California.
Yeah, it's too green to be New Mexico. These trees here are not native to the West Texas part that I lived in. So it's either New Mexico, Arizona, or California. And judging by the pink you can see in the background there, I'm guessing Southern Cal where they got money.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of home. That's all.
Nice. Nice. That's kind of the reason I picked it too, although like completely different reasons, because I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize those trees from West Texas. It's got some mountains in the background. Hey, those trees actually aren't that native to West Texas, but they like do like get imported in, man. It's pretty cool.
So while we wait for Ryan to show up, he says he's gonna be 5 minutes late, and wait for Sean to return from the mics are hot. Can we talk about the duck? Can we talk about the purple duck?
Please talk about the purple duck.
All right, so Sean, the purple duck. Is this your programming duck?
Yeah, that's my rubber duck.
Okay, so this actually is your programming duck.
Yes. Yeah.
Why
it's
does
an
it have like
duck.
multiple limbs below it?
It's an octopus duck.
Oh my god!
It looks
Does it work
terrifying.
as well as a regular
it's great.
duck?
Here, I can turn this on. There you go.
Oh,
nice.
Whoa, can I see the bottom? Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah,
That's
no, he's
a pretty
great.
sick duck.
Yeah, this is an amazing duck.
Oh man. Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah, it was a birthday gift, and it's maybe the best birthday gift I've ever gotten.
Has it been helpful?
A little bit. I haven't really been doing many programming problems that I need to talk through. At least not this past semester, because it's been, JavaScript, which is the worst. But it's like easy the worst,
Yeah.
Like it's, if something's broken in JavaScript, you just kind of Google why did JavaScript break in this particular case, and then something dumb happened because JavaScript is a bad language, and then you just fix it. It's not hard.
Yeah,
I don't know.
All the answers are already out there.
Yeah.
All right. So, Greg.
Yes, sir.
You have a collection of topics for us to work through.
Are we getting into it that quickly?
No
pregame, nothing.
I'd
Just
like to have
straight into it raw.
When I joined the call, the first thing I said was, I hope Greg's showing up because he's the only one who actually prepares for these.
You can tell that we are not very interesting people today.
Well, we can talk about things. I got topics to talk about, guys.
Oh, okay.
They're not very interesting. Like, we have some potted plants in the house, and one of them started growing like a random weed. My wife and I were like, I don't know, let's just let it grow. I wonder what weed that is. Turns out, like 6 months later, it's a pepper plant, and now it's growing a pepper.
Ooh, peppers are delicious.
Yeah, but it sort of came up out of the middle of nowhere. We had planted succulents in there, and for some reason, peppers started growing. Just for no reason whatsoever.
So remind me, is a pepper not a succulent?
No, pepper's not a succulent.
Okay, so what
desert
qualifies
area.
as a succulent versus not?
A succulent is a desert plant that absorbs and retains water very carefully.
Right,
doesn't
like a
grow very
cactus.
fast, like a cactus. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a pepper is like a vegetable.
Pepper's a fruit.
Sure, it's probably a fruit.
But
Yeah, it's got seeds on the inside.
Pepper does the same thing as a cactus, right? Like it holds water.
I mean, all plants hold water, but it's not at all like a cactus in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, never mind.
A little bit.
Moving
Just a little
on.
bit.
This is why I studied nuclear engineering and not botany.
Are peppers succulents? I don't know.
You know what? They are succulent. They are tasty.
All right, now we need your topics. We ran out. That was it. That's all I had for you.
I mean, I could talk about how much I love the snow in Monster Hunter World.
Oh my god.
I don't think we should bring up Monster Hunter World just for Neal's safety, so he doesn't have to listen to me be like, it's silent all the time. Ah!
And what's with all these characters' names? It was like Snow and Lightning and...
Oh, that's Final Fantasy 13, and that is
Monster
not a
Hunter World
topic that you
has-
ever want to bring up with me.
Monster Hunter World has literary greats like Feisty Fiver and Bro Fiver and Cool Fiver.
Those are like character names? Oh,
Well,
wow.
there are characters with actual names, but a lot of the just like ambient NPCs just have like adjective title.
I kind of prefer that, actually.
I actually like it a lot. I
whether
like
or not
that.
I'm talking to someone important.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
just
like
like such and such Fiver, such and such botanist, blah 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 blah, and then you're like, and my name is Dakota Kai, and you're like, all right, I found the real person. I found him. Let's talk to him.
My favorite part is that there's a recurring character. I think it's the Chill Fiver. He's like the dude with the faux hawk. But he's like a recurring character, but they never bother to give him a name, so he's just Chill Fiver in all the cutscenes that he's in.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
All right, what are your topics, Greg?
All right, so I thought that a topic that would be very interesting for some people is the topic of character creation for specifically Dungeons and Dragons. And I came to this because the advice channel in the Discord is so full of people being like, I watched such and such show, or I haven't watched such and such show. Does anyone have any ideas on how to play X? And so I think that there's kind of two topics that I think I want to touch on, and we can just elaborate and, you know, grow off in various directions from there. Is what do we do to make characters and kind of dig into that? Because I think all of us are quite experienced at digging up some characters and rolling some bones. And two, the concept that's kind of relatively new, I think, over the last half decade or so, of I watched Sean play this awesome elf who ate people on Frozen Frontier, and now I want to make a ranger just like that. Right? Like, let's make cool elf eating characters that we've seen on screen. Did he eat elves? He ate non-elves.
He would have eaten elves too.
He would have eaten elves too. Okay.
Yeah.
He was indiscriminate in his consumption of living beings.
Can't let things go to waste.
So I think let's start at the more basic level. When you are coming up with new characters, what is your process, right? Let's start there. And we'll go to Neal because that's what everyone's here for. The great master
No one gives
himself.
a shit what if I were to do this show by myself, no one would show up, to be honest. My process is sort of, I don't know what to do. I don't know. And then like some small kernel of an idea, like, you know, I don't know. I don't have any ideas right now. Sean?
A window into the mind of Neal.
Yeah, this is the process.
So for me, I feel like class says a lot about the kind of character that you're playing. So I start by going, what class do I want to play? Because if I want to play a fighter versus a paladin, that says something about who the character is. And then I come up with a name and a motivation, and that's about the extent of everything I do, aside from giving them some general details like appearance.
So
Like,
you're
I don't.
a minimalist. You choose
I
the
really
basics that you
like
need to play.
learning about characters through play rather than trying to define them through the backstory. Like, people will hand me a 2-page backstory, and my brain will just immediately deflate, and I die on the spot. It's rough. And it's like the one downside of trying to make all your characters defined through play is sometimes some of your characters wind up really boring.
Yeah.
Like, I think Tom was probably kind of a boring character after getting all the way through him. Like, he didn't even have much going on. He was just...
You say that, and everyone in Seeker's like Discord was like, Tom is my favorite character. I love Tom. Tom.
You know what? I'm fine with that. It's probably just like a relatable thing, I guess, right? Because he was like kind of ordinary dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of benefit to be found in discovering your character through play. I kind of did a little bit of thinking about different styles and ways to make characters, because not everyone will make them the same. Excuse me. And I think that my personal favorite of the options that I kind of came up with was discovery through play. I think that this is the way I kind of make characters. Much like you, I want to pull up a class and kind of build from there. I think that one of the most important things is your toolkit for solving problems, because at the heart of Dungeons and Dragons is the solving of problems, right? It's kind of like being an engineer. You don't necessarily need to know science or math or anything, really. You are trained to solve problems because that's what your job is. In Dungeons and Dragons, your character is really solving problems as they come up in play. That's the core mechanic of gameplay, and then everything else is kind of a side effect of that as you tell your story. So I start with the basic toolkit, and that usually, based on the editions I play, is starting with your class. And then from there, I kind of can discover how my character wants to approach these problems in play, and that informs quite a bit of how I'm going to role play other situations. And so I agree with you in that regard. What I don't agree with you with is I don't come up with any thought or backstory beforehand. I think at that point I kind of become a little bit lost in the wind. Okay. So I want to make sure that I have my class and I have lots of empty spaces, right? There's a really cool passage in Dungeon World, if you've ever read it, where it talks about creating maps but leaving blank spaces. And I think that's very applicable to everything that isn't map making as well.
So I agree with you.
Yeah.
And what I mean when I say that I come up with a motivation is I like coming up with something very broad that defines the general direction they want to go, but isn't specific. I think one of my usual advice is if you can leave it down to one sentence, you're doing it right. And my personal favorite that I've ever read, because there are tons of examples of that online, right? I think my personal favorite was I didn't like being a farmer, so I decided to become a hero instead. I love that motivation, because it says a lot. Like, they want to be a hero, but that's a very broad thing, right? There's a lot of ways to become a hero. And it also, I didn't like being a farmer says you used to be a farmer, and that informs you about your background skills. They're probably gonna have things like animal handling and agriculture. That's kind of their background and their knowledge. I like a little bit of motivation that tells us both the very broad direction of where they want to go, and also who they were before they became an adventurer. Those are the two things that I want to know.
I think those are very key points. And having just like some waypoints on your empty map that you can fill in over the next couple of sessions. Most of my characters will start out very generically, plus a goofy voice, and then will kind of flesh out as we play. It's how Yaramir got to be such a terrible, awful person by the end. That got informed very quickly. And Croak too. Maybe I'm just a bad person. I don't know. What's this say about me?
You did specifically go for the evil character with Croak. I remember you did that.
This is true. Neal told me I was neutral evil, and so I was like, all right, let's be it.
Hey Ryan, how's it going?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's all right.
Doing battle with a colony of mold men.
Ooh,
nice.
Yeah. I unfortunately live in the Northwest, unlike Greg over here.
I moved.
Our videos up on stream. They have no idea how beautiful your home
we talked
is.
Briefly about where that might be. Yeah,
that looks like
this is just where I live now. This is like in my apartment.
Yeah, it's definitely somewhere in Southern California,
right?
Yeah,
it could be Santa Barbara, but
it could be.
LA,
I keep thinking it is. Yeah. I think. I see. This is. At first, when you asked me what do I do with the character, I don't know. But now after listening to Sean talk, I know what I do now. So I prefer to roll stats and then sort of assign them and see what the stats tell me about my character. So if I have low strength, then I'm going to be a character who, like, how would this, if I'm playing a wizard with low strength, how would that low strength have affected my character in the past? And how would that have shaped who they are? And if I've got high willpower, what does that say about them? And I try and, like, take my stats and turn it into some sort of story somehow. And that gives me like a vague idea of what my character might be up to. It gives me like a little bit of backstory, but nothing so solid that I have to stick to it. Just enough that I can be inspired, and then everything else is sort of discovered through play. You know, it might start out as a dark, edgy character who was like traumatized in his past, and then like 5 sessions later, he's just like, well, he's happy and fun now. You know, he deals with his trauma just by singing songs and kicking halflings in the nuts. You know, it's yeah.
As all good, you know, lawful characters do. Halfling nuts kicking is a honored pastime.
Yeah, I mean, the halflings might not appreciate it, but it's tradition. And what can you do about tradition other than follow it, right? It would be improper about such traditions.
Hackmaster has a special move called the groin stomp, which is specifically available to gnomes.
Oh my god. Every time you talk about Hackmaster, I feel like I have to play it.
How can gnomes have groin stomp? They're going to be like the smallest creature out there.
Specifically,
how are they gonna...
Okay, so there's gnomes, and then there's gnome titans, which are a subrace of gnomes.
That are bigger?
Slightly bigger. They're like the warrior gnomes.
Titan?
Yeah.
Hold on. First, before we get into anything else, what the fuck is a gnome titan?
A regular sized person.
They're still short. They're probably like dwarf size. Probably a little bit smaller actually, but they're like the more violent militaristic kind of gnome. And they can do groin stomps. They have the groin stomp special.
Do they have to get you prone first?
I think you have to be prone for them to do the groin stomp.
Okay. That makes
But then
more
they can
sense.
stun you if they land the groin stomp.
Wow.
Sorry, you mentioned kicking halflings in the nuts, and it just made me think of that. Also, Greg, I feel like Hackmaster is the kind of game where you'd love to read the book, and then you would think about trying to play that game, and you'd be like,
oh, that's me in Shadowrun. Every time people mention Shadowrun, I'm like, God, that just sounds so cool. And then I remember reading the rules, and I'm like, never, no.
I'd say the difference is that Shadowrun is a gorgeous book that is horribly written. Trying to read Shadowrun was a nightmare, right? Hackmaster is a joy to read. It's just difficult to run. It's really frustrating to run.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like, because it's meant to be a parody of AD&D, and it has a lot of that like kind of over the top Gygaxian prose to it, and it's a lot of fun to read. Like the section on cursed items is your GM, the bastard that he is, has no doubt populated his dungeons with items that look useful but were actually designed to kill your character.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we should bring Ryan in on the loop a little bit.
I'm sort of piecing it together.
Yeah, Neal ran out of pre-chat really fast, so we're just diving into D&D topics today, unless you've got something to save us. But I've noticed that in the advice channel in Discord, there's been a lot of people asking about what to do with their new characters, both how to make them, how to get ideas. And I thought it would be an interesting conversation topic to kind of dig into the different ways to do so and the things that we pull inspiration from. So we started with the just general question of how do we go about making our characters for the first time? So do you have a preferred style or method? How do you go about making your characters?
I think I tend to take the opposite approach that Neal just described, where I usually come in with a concept in mind and then mold it to fit. I mean, obviously, if you're like rolling stats straight down the line, you're kind of limited in your approach. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Usually I have a concept. So like Grimes, for example, was a mountaineering whatever before I even rolled. It was like there was this campaign and Neal was like, rogues aren't going to be useful. And I was like, okay, I can probably pick a set of non-weapon proficiencies and a character archetype that will be useful in this campaign setting. And yeah. And then it sort of fleshes out from there.
Mm. Yeah, that's a lot like how I go about things.
And yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, just like pick out the kind of archetype you want to do, figure out the kind of tools that you want to work with, and then build your stats around that. Yeah,
and it's not always that concrete. It's not even necessarily an archetype. Sometimes it's just like a little kernel of something cool that you think just of. It's a name. Like Malsifer Winter was a cool name that I thought of before I even like had any more to that character concept.
Mm-hmm.
That has definitely been how I created characters before. one of my favorite characters of all time, was created simply because I had a funny voice that I wanted to do. And I could do it for entire sessions without breaking the voice. So I was like, I'm going to annoy everyone at the table super hard.
Yeah. One bit of potentially useful advice that I'll throw in is that you don't necessarily need to have your character fully fleshed out to start playing it. Like you don't need, in fact, it's almost a hindrance to have pages and pages of backstory before you take the character to the table and find out what it's really like. And one thing that I think worked out really well for us was the Frofro flashbacks.
Yeah.
That was a really cool way to flesh out backstory, and all that came after we had started playing the characters, and it was fun.
And it was also kind of tying into the direction of like, why did this character become this? So it was by design the story of how this happened.
And it was nice having it later, so you didn't have to start it that way. You know, you could figure out who your character was, and then make up their past like halfway through the campaign.
Yeah, that was a cool way to do it.
Yeah, it was like Lost, except we didn't cut to flashbacks like every 5 seconds.
It was like Lost, but not bad after the 3rd season.
Yeah, and I think
It was like Lost, but it got better.
It got better with time, not worse.
I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Ryan? I have a bad.
No, you're fine. I was going to say that the challenge is leaving enough. Like I guess this is exactly what you're saying about the blank spots in the map. It's like leaving enough room to grow into the character, or to like figure these things out and flesh them in later.
I find it very interesting that all 4 of us kind of arrived at that same spot, right?
Yeah.
Where we are growing into our characters as we play to some amount, no matter kind of like what small part we started with. For Neal, it was stats. For Sean, it was class. For you, it was just a small idea. I want to be a good rogue, or just a building block. And then from there, kind of grow into it. So I think what I've seen a lot on Discord is people that want to have everything figured out, right? They want to flesh out this whole entire backstory, and they want to flesh out what their character is going to be. And
don't do that.
I think these people are secret dungeon masters, right?
Like
it's like making a character.
These people
are
big world builders, and they're just run your own game.
And if that's what you want to do, build your own world. Game.
That's great. There are actual like games that are designed to be world building simulators. Like, isn't Microscope that basically like you get together with your friends and you use a series of index cards to just build a world, and that's the whole game. If that's what you're into, go for it. But
or you can just write a cool story, or create a campaign, or like a adventure, whatever. And it's not that characters like PCs don't get to participate in world building at all, but it's not the same route. You've got to be patient, and most of it happens during play.
I was gonna say, like, you can make a backstory in advance, but everything you write down on the page like doesn't mean anything once the game starts. And like I imagine most of us have either like experienced or at least seen the example of the person who like made a character that had a really thoroughly defined backstory, and then in play had a character that was nothing like what they wound up with through the backstory.
Totally.
Yeah,
or
like it's
forget about these things. You've got this like long lost nemesis that never shows up, and then like they do show up, and you've forgotten who they are. And
it's I don't know. I've never really seen intricate backstories work out well. And the one time that I ever actually put a lot of work into making a character, which was Ferris actually, that was just Neal and I talking, because I was like, I want to make this character kind of an asshole, but I want him to like have a reason to still work with this party, right? I don't want him to be like the edgy loser who just like everyone's like, why is he even here? Like, why is he even?
Yeah. How much of Ferris was fleshed out beforehand versus filled in as he went along?
We knew his general history, and we knew why he went to Caledonia, because that was important, was knowing like, what is the reason he's with the party? Why will it keep him with them even though he doesn't like anybody in the party?
Yeah, because Ferris is actually one of the characters I was thinking of when I was talking about leaving those blank spots or keeping your cards close enough.
Yeah, there were still a lot of blanks
that you can be surprised. Because as another player at the table, Ferris was a bit of a mystery that like there were a lot of interesting twists and turns as the campaign evolved. The whole
Yeah, and that
Like
it's
Scragblood and then a lot of the stuff going on in the Frostlands was. I felt like there was a lot about that character that
I knew. I guess not that
made
much.
more sense as play unfolded.
Yeah, so Ferris is probably the most work I've ever put into a character before they ever saw play, and even then I didn't know that much about him before I started playing them.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's because all that work was specifically like, how do we make this work at a table that has other people playing in the game, right? That's if you're gonna put a lot of work into a character, I'd say that's the angle to approach it from, is how can I make this character satisfying to play in a way that doesn't ruin the game for the other 4 people at the table.
I think there's also something to be said for the notion of you don't have a character goal that you are trying to attain. It's like it's the journey, not the destination with your character. If you were to design the most badass character from the get-go, that would be the end of your character, because there's nowhere for them to go. So you don't want to you don't need to flesh out this intricate, amazing thing that you're going to be. You're going to be growing into something. You're going to be changing as you level a whole bunch. So don't bother, there's not something to hold on to and grab. There's something that will shift and change in your hands. Mm-hmm. So don't worry so much about fleshing it out and making all the details perfect, because you're never going to have your perfect character. And even if you did, you wouldn't be able to remember all of their fucking little details, you know?
Mm-hmm. And especially in D&D, where everybody starts out at level, even if you're starting at level 3, which is probably the highest you see campaigns start, unless they're specifically going for high level games. Mm-hmm. It's really weird when somebody makes the backstory that talks about all the crazy deeds this person did, and then they're a level 1 fighter, and they're really bad at everything for a while, and then they slowly become good over time. It's there are other games that are better at that. In Ironsworn, there's no levels in that game, so you can make somebody who has a lot of history and experience and is skilled at the things they do. You can make that happen. But Dungeons and Dragons is not a great system for that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking. There's probably games out there where you can have the character with the epic backstory, but Dungeons and Dragons it's basically modeling a hero's journey, not a superhero movie.
Yeah, D&D is very grounded in the mechanics, right? So it does kind of limit you in that you can't do the old soldier past their prime who's getting dragged back into service for whatever reason. Those kind of archetypes don't work as well.
I still play them all the time, though. I like the old soldier very much.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also helps if
maybe not at level 1,
league.
But if you're at level 2 or 3, you could make it work. Yeah,
that could work as well. But yeah, those archetypes tend to not work as well, but you can kind of just bear that in mind. Try to make the fiction of your character match up to their mechanics.
Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of characters do players do what you just said, where they say, I want to be this great assassin who's raised by this cult of assassins, and they're here on their mission. And you're like, cool, you're level 1, you have +0 to hit. Go for it, killer assassin. I think in that situation,
I think that the best part that you can, or the best thing that you can do with that is say, that's awesome, but you haven't finished your training yet. You've been raised by these assassins, you're training to do this, but you are still an adept. You're still a novitiate. You're on your first missions. You're putting all this training that you've had to use for the first time. And I think that those types of characters just need to have smaller goals. Well, the thing that I heard the most from Sean and Neal is players often come to the table with really big high-end goals, and I think that a more satisfying mode of play and something that can help you in character creation is creating a series of smaller goals for your character. Something you can obtain in 1 to 3 sessions is going to be much more satisfying, I think, than something that's going to be the major driving goal for the entire life of your character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if you have this really complicated world's greatest assassin idea in mind, you can still work with that if you take the point of, this idea of this character I have is who I will become, and what we're going to do is play through the story of how they became the cool badass assassin. And if you rephrase your starting position with this complicated character as your ending position, and you're like working your way there, then it gives you an opportunity to be like, well, if I'm gonna be this badass assassin, which subtype of assassin? Am I like the sneaky guy who never gets seen? Am I the guy who just like shows up and murders everything and vanishes really quickly? Am I the wizard assassin? And that gives you some tools to, you can still have your goal of like, I'm going to be the best assassin, but not I'm starting as the best assassin.
Yeah,
you just have to reframe the timeline.
This made me think. I see a lot of this get enabled because a lot of GMs are very conflict averse and they don't want to like address these sorts of situations when they come up. So if you're running a game and you have a player pull that kind of thing, don't like shut them down, but also don't immediately go. Don't just kind of like quietly let it all happen and then kind of subtly undermine them in the background. Like work with them and be like, okay, this is going to be more of a game about like becoming that badass master assassin, right? So like, let's make your character who's still in their training, and then they will either become that badass that you want them to be, or they'll die trying. Then you work with them to make something that they want, right? Like, because your player is telling you what they want, and you just, it's kind of on you to like point out like, all right, let's work together to make something that works in the context of this game. So like, yeah, I see a lot of GMs who either will shut down ideas wholesale, or they will not call somebody out when an idea needs to be called out a little bit. Like be willing to kind of like push back a little bit and work with the players to build something that's mutually beneficial.
Have we finished this topic? Because I've got some other stuff we can bring up.
Sure. We can
you
transition
look like you had
from
something
there.
you want to say.
Yeah.
That was hesitant.
Neal, you do know that I multi-layer my topics. I have like a broad one, and then we can drill down forever. So if you want to switch it up, I'm totally good. I want to switch it up. I'd like to add one last thing before we do. Is the starting point of your games does not have to be level 1. It is a common starting point, and it is a good starting point, especially if you are new. But if you are coming to the table with a superhero, an option, start at level 10. Start at level 15.
Yeah, so I will say that I feel like characters that are made from, like, you make a level 10 character without any backstory, they feel really flat. Like, I feel like that's character development, levels 1 through 9.
Yeah, I'm with you there, but that's not everyone, right?
Yeah,
like
I think it's more challenging to make it depends what you're going for. If you're just like, okay, superhero movie, I'm Batman, I'm a level,
sometimes
I'm
it's
a level
really
10
fun
rogue,
to...
and it's like, okay, but Batman's a flat character. I mean, it's interesting than other superheroes, but like,
he's interesting in the context of superheroes.
Yeah, but like Green Lantern, that's right. Okay,
I don't
be a level 15.
You.
You're a level 15 warlock with your with your pact ring or whatever. Okay, go ahead and make your superhero. But it's going to be a different campaign.
It's a different campaign. That's 100% true. Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. I don't disagree with anything you said, but sometimes you like to just be Iron Man.
So, I mean, what we did in Frofro that I had never thought of or even realized it was a good idea, except in hindsight, we started at level 3, but then we basically, in our flashbacks, I think we were 3. Oh, no, I was 3. We started with 5,000 experience or something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or something. So I mean, I was level 3. I think everyone else was level 2.
Because rogues have the good experience.
But then we basically played through level 1 in the flashbacks out of sequence, which was really that was really cool. I've never done anything like that or thought to do that. But...
Yeah, I think there's probably a sense of scale to that too, where I feel like as a group, I tend to go toward lower level games, and my idea of like my ideal progression arc for an AD&D second edition game would probably end at level 10 or 11. Like a full campaign would probably go to about that point, and that's where everyone's kind of wrapping up and finishing up all their storylines. But technically D&D goes up to like level 20-ish or further if you start buying all those supplements, but nobody does that.
No one does that. No. No one does that.
So yeah, I think there's probably differences in scale as well, where for some people starting at level 7 is probably just like getting past the amateur league stuff and getting into the real game. So it probably is also a difference in how you look at the game between different people.
And if you don't care about all the plot and the role play, jumping in at level 7 for more interesting encounters, I guess, is viable.
But maybe you could start at level 7 if your character has some sort of like amnesia, and then you're like, I don't know who I am, but I can swing a
God.
sword.
Well, what I was gonna say,
I've had so many amnesia plots in my life. I don't think I can do another ever again. No.
I think, did Final Fantasy VIII break you?
You know, Final Fantasy VIII didn't break me because I was young enough when I played it the first time. I still was accepting. What broke me? I don't know. It had to be Hollywood.
I was gonna say I could do a level 7 game if it was like a 3-month long campaign. Do like a short run campaign with a bunch of reasonably high level characters. I could do that.
All right.
All right. So Neal, what would you have for us?
Well, what I have for us is that in about 40 days, Ryan is going to become Mr. Tang, and I just thought we should address this issue, Ryan.
Is this Love Bites?
This is Love Bites now. We're now doing Love Bites. You're about to get
Nice.
married. Do you
Well,
need
if
any
there's-
advice?
If there's anything I know, it's love. I'm almost 25. I'm 24 years old right now, and I think that's the age where you know everything there is to know about love.
Well, yeah. We have a whole panel of experts here. What do you need to know, Ryan?
So many things.
Do you know what's going to happen that night? Do you need us to walk you through the process of when a man and a woman love each other very much, they give each other a very special hug, and 9 months later, a bird comes and visits them. Store? No?
I recommend.
You guys should see Ryan's face. It's so defeated. He's not enjoying this topic
I
at
recommend
all.
washing the bed sheets at least once a week. That's one thing that we all got to learn eventually.
What if we live in an apartment and the washer dryer sucks?
You have multiple
for, like,
sets
2
of
Can we
sheets.
extend it to
Really,
once a
I was
month?
saying like don't do it once every 6 months, like people who live in dorm rooms.
Yeah.
That's the best piece of advice I got from for married life is wash your bed sheets once a week.
Or 2 if your washer dryer really sucks. I got literally nothing here.
I don't think Neal thought through this topic.
Oh, of course not. I don't think anything all the way through. Greg, you must have some advice here. You're a ladies' man about
Advice
town.
for married life.
Yeah.
See, here's the issue. No one likes me long enough for me to get too much experience.
Aww.
Sometimes the
let's see.
outsider's perspective can be more insightful.
Definitely, I guess. That's true in a lot of things. I think my best advice would be to enjoy yourself and the moment.
I'm doomed.
Because too often the mundanity of life kind of makes you forget that you're sharing it with someone that you love and is special. And I think that's the best I got. I dug deep.
Sounded very wise.
But yeah, I think that's true of more than just married life, though. Like, just in general, like, don't let the banality of everyday life kind of make you forget, the good things that are there and appreciate them.
Yeah.
Wise words for anyone.
Do you have anything you'd like to say on this topic, Ryan? It's a big thing.
You brought it up.
I know, yeah. That's why I'm bringing it up, because it's a big moment in your life. Are you coming to terms with it? Have you gripped it properly? Are you ready?
I've got kind of a loose grip. Maybe that's my problem. I have a question for you, Neal. How do you get your wife to let you play so much D&D?
Well,
I can barely squeeze in a session a week.
it helps that I'm the only source of income, so she can't judge what I do because she's got no ground to stand on.
Damn. The roles
I
are
can
reversed around here.
Yeah, I can kind of get away
Got
with
no
bloody
ground to stand
murder
on.
until she starts working, and then it'll change. Then it'll be like, well, Neal, you don't need to stay up until 5 working. You could come out to this party. And I'm like, that'll be my future.
I like how your sad whine is about not staying up until 5 and working and going to a party.
I don't want to go to a party.
Yeah, I want to stay home and work.
Well, that was my night
sounding-
last night.
Neal's sounding disturbingly like me here. Like, I don't want to go out to a party. I don't want to talk to other people.
This was the situation last night. One of our friends was having a birthday party at the bar, like, a 3-minute walk from our house, and all of our friends were showing up.
But
And
it's snowy outside.
it was a little chilly, it was freezing, but the bar's really close, and it's our friends, and it's their birthday, and we haven't seen them in months, and I stayed home and planned Demons Run things when she went out to a party. And it worked out well in my case, because by the time she got there, everyone had already left. So...
That's sad. That worked out well for you, but not so good for her.
she met a different friend there, and they had a couple beers and had a great time. Yeah. Well, what about
really
you?
didn't think this topic through.
No. Well, I'm going to make it even worse. I'm going to switch on over, Sean. How's the Guardian Force?
She's doing well. I don't know.
That's my favorite joke of all time.
I like how it's stuck. The worst thing though is that I use it like instead of girlfriend now. So I'll say Guardian Force to people who have no context for this joke, and they'll look at me confused. Yeah.
What's
I
on the
don't know.
table for you guys? Talk to us about your love life. Are you guys getting married as well soon?
My advice is do not marry somebody that you have
Nice
not lived
dodge.
with before. And I just got an angry message from the Guardian Force that says I'm going to close the stream in all capital letters.
She's going to unplug your internet.
Oh no! I didn't realize that she'd be watching. I thought this was a safe place where you could talk about your feelings openly.
Oh, I have a fun fact, actually. So she has a bookmark to go to YouTube, right? So she doesn't have to type the address every time. And her bookmark is a random episode of Hardcore Heroes. And I looked at the viewership numbers for that episode, and it's like 1,000 above the episodes immediately before and after it.
She's using it as her bookmark.
Yeah, so I think her just like bouncing to YouTube through that bookmark has bumped the viewer count on that video by like 1,000.
Excellent.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But yeah, live with somebody before marrying them is my advice to people out there, because like that's good advice for a lot of things. Like not even in romantic relationships. There's a lot of like best friends will become roommates in college, and by the time they're not roommates anymore, they're also no longer friends. Like
Yeah.
that's a big thing. Like you want to make sure that living with somebody day to day is something that works for both of you before you make a lasting commitment like that.
Yeah, I lived with Neal for about 6 months, and it's poisoned our relationship forever.
Yeah, we didn't talk for like a year after that.
I moved halfway across the world to get away from that bastard.
And I left town as well. I went way north. Yeah.
I'm sorry, when you
secretly
say
why you
halfway
went to
across the
Vietnam.
world, do you mean from California to Washington State?
No, Australia.
Oh, okay.
He really had to go.
Okay.
We shared a wall. It wasn't good. Yeah. We broke windows.
Just one single wall, though.
Yeah, there was one wall between our bedrooms.
I mean, I guess we shared all the walls, but we.
Well, okay. Yes. We had a communal wall between our rooms with additional closet space, which made it easier to handle. Yeah. I was thinking, do you remember when we had that CRT monitor and we tried to break it with a broadsword, but instead of breaking the CRT, the broadsword bent?
Yes.
I remember that story. You put that on Reddit at one point, and I remember
Did
reading
we?
that memory just came into my mind.
It was like a 24-inch old CRT monitor. We chucked it like face down off of the roof of the house onto concrete. The monitor just bounced. The glass didn't get phased or scratched at all. We took a broadsword to it and hit it right on the edge on that front concave piece of glass. The broadsword ended up with like a 5-degree bend in the blade.
I mean, that's not too surprising, because swords are pretty light, right? They're not really meant for smashing into things.
Perhaps, but
Glass is hard.
yeah, I think
And
the
CRT
thickness-
glass is pretty thick.
Yeah, I just didn't realize that glass could be so strong in such a configuration. I thought, if you throw it off a building, it'll break.
Yeah, I forgot
way.
about that.
Yeah.
Granted, it was only like an 8-foot fall.
Yeah, but still, 8 feet on
Did we
concrete.
Did we even break it eventually? Did we bust out a sledgehammer or something? Or
I
did
think
we give
I
up?
think we just busted out the back of it and then threw it away. Yeah, it was a mess. Okay.
Things
All right,
are surprisingly resilient from falls from great heights. My flip phone in college survived a fall from a 5-story dormitory window.
Ooh.
It was fine the next morning.
Oh, Greg,
Nice.
as a fan of flip phones, you might,
Yeah.
if you're looking for one that will probably never break on you, try looking up the Boulder.
I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. This flip phone, like not
You have a Razr,
special,
right?
will never break ever.
Yeah, you
Like,
have a
it's
Razr, don't you?
Indestructible.
I
It's
miss my
a
Razr so much.
Verizon LG something.
Oh,
Does
okay.
it say Razr on it anywhere? I don't know.
You
Yeah,
still have a
no,
flip
the
phone?
Boulder was a
Yes.
famous flip phone for like
I'm
being
impressed.
borderline indestructible. The one instance of somebody breaking that phone I saw was when they took a shotgun to it. Like they literally like lined it up and shot it with a shotgun, and it didn't even break. Like it still functioned. Like it was, the keyboard was
You know,
kind of broken.
all those times I accidentally shoot my cell phone with a shotgun. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be indestructible enough for me. I'm a regular. Oh shit! Who's the politician that shot his friend in the face with a shotgun?
Dick
I forgot.
Cheney.
Oh, Dick Cheney.
I'm a regular Dick Cheney.
Oh yeah.
Yep, accidentally. We all
My
accidentally
jokes
shoot
don't
our.
work so good when I need people to explain them for me.
That was
we all accidentally shoot our friends in the face with a gun every once in a while.
That was a proud moment in American history. A drunk vice president shooting his friend in the face on a quail hunt
Was that while he was vice president?
while he was vice
While
president.
he was in office, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That was great. Didn't call the cops until like the next day because they had been drinking and didn't want their BAC to be tested.
Does that matter if you're not driving?
Not legally speaking, but I think it's like you don't want to be like I was
Oh,
drunk
for,
and I
like,
shot
the
my
PR
friend in the
reasons?
face. Yeah, for
Oh,
PR
yeah.
stuff. But then it backfired because like it came out that they waited 6 hours or 10 hours or something before they called the police.
I
and
mean,
before
has
they called
this
hospital
affected
services.
Dick Cheney's life in the slightest?
No.
No.
He was temporarily embarrassed for a short while.
I mean, to be
we're
honest,
joking
there
about
are
That
much
would
now,
worse.
imply that he was capable of feeling embarrassment.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that there are much worse things that Dick Cheney has done that he should face consequences for than accidentally shooting his face or his friend in the face with a gun.
yeah. All right, Greg, save us.
Yeah.
Save us, Greg.
This is going down the politics
That was
real
a
fast.
terrifying road we went down. I
Yeah.
will admit. I do think that I would be much better at Love Bites if I could do it in character rather than as myself, because I am inherently uninteresting and inexperienced. But I'm sure we could make a character up to say all kinds of awful things to people. And that would be
We've
fun.
tried a few episodes like that.
I've had.
Yeah. How'd it go?
Hilarious.
I don't know. I don't want to watch the VODs and find out. But, right,
You did one as a
We did one as
father-
Friar Morton.
Yeah, Friar Morton Bixby.
We talked about doing one as Georg, but I think that I figured
Kill her
the-
and steal
all
her
of them
soul.
would be- yeah, it would be disregard women, acquire arcane power.
The one true lover, arcane power. See, I think those are the kinds of episodes we need, though. I think we need just a right bastard. Friar Morton Bigsby is one of my favorite characters, though. I'm a big fan.
I enjoyed playing him.
Yeah. All right. I will try to save us from the love topic. So back to, I guess, characters, because this is what I have prepared. So we've taken a detour and we're back. I kind of identified different ways people might make characters, and I'm pleased that we all kind of make characters in the same way. But I'm interested to see your takes on some of these, as well as maybe you could add your own. I think that the immediate one that we didn't touch on is the quote-unquote power gamer or the power build. A lot of people like to make characters via identifying a build order. And this is much more prevalent in like 3.5 Pathfinder 4th edition, where you're where like the game mechanics reward you a great deal for building an incredibly powerful kind of build order. I know people who played Pathfinder and wrote down 20 levels of what they're going to take in advance, so they knew they had the order. But I've seen this perspective even in more loosey-goosey games like 5th edition and 2nd edition, where people want to build out a character that specifically feels powerful. I'm going to be this class, and I'm going to have this sub-race, and I'm going to get stats like this, and I'm going to get this feat and take this weapon proficiency, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Have you ever built a character in that manner? What was your experience doing so, and how do you feel? Like, I'm sure as dungeons or as dungeon masters, we've all experienced players that have played this way. How did that feel in game, and how did you handle that?
Okay. So from the DM's perspective, I'd say, who cares? Like, if somebody wants to play a powerful character, just let them. Like, the one point where I will put my foot down on it is if they start trying to make builds that are ridiculous and wonky. Like, have you heard about the peasant chain gun and stuff like that? Like, those ideas that work theoretically because of the rules of D&D, but kind of break the logic of a believable world. If that's the road we start going down for a character, I'll put my foot down and say no. But aside from that, if somebody wants to play an effective character, cool, let them. Like, D&D is one of the only games where I see people get mad at the idea of somebody playing it effectively, and I really don't get that. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't mind the effectiveness of the character. What I mind is this, like, I'm going down this path, and if something happens that prevents me from doing that, all of my plans are ruined, and I'm not going to have fun anymore. Like, you're headed down this path of this character, and then you lose your arm in combat, and you can no longer go down your sword and board path, and you have to rethink your character. But if you built this path, and you're going to go down, and now you lost your arm, your whole character is ruined, and you get caught up in the destination, the destination, and not what you're actually doing. You lose sight of the fun of the game because you've got this build that eventually you want to achieve, and it's the goal, and that's lame.
I mean, at that point, like, it's fine if that happens. Just retire your character. Like, the idea of, I'm going to go down this path, I think that one trips a lot of people up because their character didn't technically die, so they feel like they have to keep playing them. But if your character takes on a grievous injury that makes it not fun to play them anymore, just retire the character.
Yeah, or you could also have a more open idea and be like, wow, my character has had this weird, unexpected thing happen. How can I make this fun? And you could have perhaps an even more memorable character by working through this, like, a surprising setback that eventually you get to work to your advantage in some way. I just don't like the, like, this is how it's gonna go, and if it doesn't go the way I want it to go, then I'm not having fun because this is the plan, and the DM's not letting me play the game the way I want to play it. You know, I don't like the hissy fits.
It does get a little weird. The one thing that I find a little weird, and I guess it probably bothers other people less, I tend to not map out characters too much in advance, but I know some people who will map out their entire progression path before they've even started playing the character. But honestly, like, if that's how people enjoy playing the character, let them do it.
Play the game wrong.
And then from a player perspective, the one time I did that was Quincy for Heroes Graveyard. And I knew very little about 5e, but I knew Heroes Graveyard was supposed to be a meat grinder. So I posted on the Discord, like, hey, I want to play like an archer. How do I make a good archer? And some people helped me come up with the build.
I had the opposite approach, and I kind of fucked up the fun for the rest of the party. Like, I rolled for HP and rolled super poorly.
See, I tried to fuck up the fun.
And I had this ineffective character, and, like, I didn't mean to let the party down, but just, like, being squishy and not very useful, it was just like, well, sorry you're all dying, guys, but cleric's running around here with like 15 HP, and I'm just trying not to die myself.
See, my I tried to ruin the fun for everybody else, and I think I failed because I don't think I did, but I can't. I can't
ruined
really
the fun
tell.
for Neal. He changed the rules of the game.
I made Neal ban a feat.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think clearly other people look at these games and these editions differently. But my impression playing third and fourth edition was that just like the way the game was designed, you kind of are, and I didn't like this about those editions, but you're kind of required to play them a certain way. And my approach to those editions was just like, I mean, there clearly is a right way to build characters in third edition, fourth edition. And it felt like it limits, like ostensibly you have these feats that are supposed to give you flexibility, but I look at the game and I'm like, okay, you have to take these weapon master feats, otherwise your character is just objectively worse than the characters that don't. And if you've got a party that understands that and everyone else has more pluses to hit than you do, it just feels stupid. It's like
I think part of the issue there as well is like I don't think you see less min-maxing in second edition. I just think it's much easier and much less number crunchy to min-max a character in AD&D, right? Because you pick your prime requisite, you pick the weapon they're going to specialize in, and you're probably picking a good one like the longsword and not wasting your time with crap like an axe or a spear or something. Unless it's Neal's game, in which case the spear is the best weapon ever. But like it's you people still min-max in AD&D. It's just you don't have to go down this really long and awkward progression tree in order to do so. And that's one thing I noticed, is that there's a lot more work involved in min-maxing characters in third and fourth, and that makes it a lot more intensive and easier to fuck up, and it feels like you're more constrained because of that.
I didn't feel like it took that much work. It took a little bit of looking and thinking, and I guess some people don't have that mindset, and they kind of miss out on that. Or they kind of miss that. They miss like seeing the feats that are. There's all these interesting feats that are kind of red herrings. Like you don't actually get a choice to pick a feat. When you get your feat, you take the feat that gives you +1 to hit.
Yeah,
that's the right choice. And then maybe like at level 5 or level 7 or whatever, you get a feat that you can go either way and add some flexibility. But,
yeah, and that's usually how I saw people, or that like in my experience, people will see a feat, go, that sounds really cool, and they take it and it's garbage. And they were much better off taking the boring feat that gave you +1 to hit or something like that.
Yeah.
So I take it you guys haven't built very many characters doing this, but I know specifically the kind of mechanical crunch of the game is something that our group has found satisfying in play, or at least we've encountered with a lot because Neal finds it satisfying. I don't know how much the scales
tip in either direction.
But have you ever not like had a mechanical build that interests you and wanted to build for and play that way? Because I think that sometimes people want the build to be and feel powerful, but maybe sometimes there's just a mechanical thing that's like, wow, this like Kensai monk can do crazy X, Y, or Z with this weapon. Like I want to just try that and see the mechanical glory of it.
I've never had anything so specific, but that is like how Heroes Graveyard worked. Was I want to be an archer and I don't want to play a ranger. How do I make this good?
That was what I went to Discord with. So I do that much more broadly, but yeah, I kind of do that. Like I want to play this particular way. Let me make something effective out of that.
I like to explore that for like one-shots or shenanigans characters. Well, I'll make Charger, the centaur, who dual wields lances because he's size large, so he can hold one in each arm, and he gets extra charging bonuses because he's a centaur. So there we go, my dual lance wielding charging centaur. But like, you know, after a couple sessions, I'm like, okay, that was fun. Moving on.
Even after like the first session, I mean, those characters are fun to build, but then to play, it's tough to balance, right? Because like Charger, for example, is so mechanically overpowered. Well, I mean, it's like a glass cannon, right? He's got all the HP of a level 1 character, but he deals like an average of 20 damage a round or something like that.
He can be stopped with a simple cliff and rope, though. He'll never be able to make it up. Can't climb anything. Can't fit inside houses. Can't go underground.
Two older editions have less of that. Like there's no feats or anything to like play with that. But I feel like almost every character I make kind of has that to some extent. Right, like making like mobile rogues or monks that can run really fast. It's always a fun concept to do.
So it sounds like you're more about a specific style of play than like a specific weapon build or skill or something like that.
And then like making a warlock that can see in the dark and casts darkness on themselves and
I think
there's
it's
always
more
fun
to go with like a broad area, like the mobile monk or mobile rogue, or something like, I'm going to be a thief wizard and I'm going to use my thief stats, my thief abilities for this and my wizard abilities for this, and like sort of broadly have a build, but something that's not so this feat at this level, this skill at this level, I need this spell in order to achieve blah blah blah. Like I like the big flexible picture, not so much the like nailed down, because then I don't feel like you're really doing anything. Like you already know what you're going to be. You're just grinding levels until you can get the character that you planned at level 1. You know,
for Legend of
Oh, I was just gonna say for like Diablo or something like that, I go all in on that kind of thing, right? Map out a character build in advance and then try to build that. But for Dungeons and Dragons, I don't really see the point, right? Because it's
For long-term campaigns, yeah, I think it's not the most fun way to play. But for Legend of Yaka, I made that barbarian druid. It didn't actually matter because our party was so powerful that like it didn't even come to the point where you could see the power of the characters because we just sort of raffle stomped everything. Even the Triceratopses. But like that character's pretty min-maxy. Like with a raging bear has just like an ungodly amount of HP or effective HP.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that stuff's
fun. I think I ruined
for
Legend of Yaka a little bit from our group because I had the most anti-combat character in the entire game. I was a bard who specifically buffed and debuffed characters and did nothing else.
We all know the legend of Tay-Tay. She was the best character on that show, I think.
Like,
or one of the
show
best.
Is a meat grinder. Everyone's building like raging barbarian druids and like ranged characters that are out of control powerful. And here's Greg like, I sing songs.
We needed it. It was perfect. It was perfect.
5e is almost too well balanced in that respect that you can almost make anything and it feels pretty viable.
I think that's a really valid point that I've tried to tell a lot of people when we talk about 5th edition, because I've seen people be like, how do I be an effective X in 5th edition? I'm like, make one. Any one of them, it's good. Like, is there some level of like better or worse? Yeah, like if you want a power game, you can, but anything you make in 5th edition is going to feel and play powerful.
Yeah.
Like, you can do a lot with even the weakest characters.
I think a lot of that comes down to 5th edition making you don't make very many choices about your character, right? Like the game recommends your attributes, and then after you've done your attributes, you make like 3 more choices over the lifetime of your character, and that's whether you want to take a feat or increase 2 of your attribute scores.
I mean, the choice is the character. Like you get to choose a class and subclass.
Almost all of your decisions are when you first make the character, and then there's very little that you do.
And you can mix up your stats. That's the one area in 5th edition where you can kind of choose wrong. It still doesn't feel like you can totally. You can kind of ruin your character.
Yeah,
you kind of do need your best stats to be in your.
But it also like
stat.
It's very obvious, right? It's not like you're making strange decisions about stats very often. If you're playing a fighter, you're probably doing strength unless you're a ranger or you're like a ranged fighter, which is dexterity. Like it's very straightforward how you apply your ability scores.
The one thing I actually really dislike about 5th edition is the fact that you should never play a strength anything. It should always be dex because you can just pick up
dex
a
is
finesse
so
weapon.
borked. Yeah. Well, I guess fighter technically gets certain benefits if they're melee from their strength.
There are ways to play a strength character, but dex characters are just so good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I just think it's an interesting idea to bring up because I do know that some people really like to build specific like powerful builds, and that is a way to make characters, even though it seems to be something that we're not. And I think that the takeaway that I've gotten from the 3 of you is simply like, if you want to build that way, that's fine, but we have to bear in mind that the journey is the kind of core part of play. And if your powerful build is taking away from the journey of the game and of play, then it's probably not something that we and people who play like us are going to enjoy.
I love doing that in video games, and I would probably not do that in a tabletop game. I guess if you, I don't know, I engage video games very differently than I do tabletop games.
All right. So the last way that I kind of find that people would generically build characters is kind of the opposite of where we've all started. This, I think, is the furthest from where we talk about how we build characters. But it's this idea of having a very, very strong foundation narratively of who your character is and where they want to go. And I think that we've all kind of talked about the pitfalls of this already and how this is not something that we have recommended. But let's say we wanted to. You had a strong foundation. How would you go about doing it? If you wanted to build a character that knew what they were and where they were going, how would you get to that destination?
It's all about working with your GM.
Yeah,
I think that's the only way it works. And Neal and I have done plenty of campaigns like this.
Yeah, that was
like
kind of
half of our Dicing with Death characters are this, where it's like, okay, we're gonna play a Dwarf Lord Craftsman. Let's build a campaign, or we've got to test out this new Necromancer. Let's make the campaign.
Yeah, and then we just see where it goes, and you be flexible with what you're willing to do, and you don't have too many expectations of what the results are going to be.
But if your GM's not willing to let you play a dwarven lord, then you can't show up and be like, I'm a dwarf lord, and GM's like, no, you're not, you're just some level 1 peasant. You're like, no, but it says here in my backstory that blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, you need to work with your other players.
Yeah, that's kind of where you go. And because especially if you work with the GM, then suddenly your backstory isn't just stuff on a page. Like if you go, I'm from this town, you can actually make that town a place in the game. I recommend looking at some other games for this and considering features like bonds, which are in basically every Powered by the Apocalypse game, to build out some pre-existing relationships for that character. Because that'll make them a little bit more connected to the world around them, which is a big deal if you're going to go with a character who should theoretically already have a lot of connections and not the sort of blank slate, very minimalist starting character. Yeah, it's kind of harder to make work, but I think if you just kind of talk it out with your GM and find something that you can both agree on, you can make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How in depth do you think is healthy? Right. So we definitely, I think, agree that we want to build a character kind of loosely and leave a lot of blank spaces. But there are people who want that strong foundation. And I'm sure as DMs, we've all dealt with the person that has given us the 45-page backstory all typed out in single-spaced type 10 font. Right. So
you mean the wiki?
Yes, they've linked us a wiki to the entirety of their character. So I think that something that might be interesting to address is, at what point do you say it's time to stop, right? Like at what point does that foundation building become either, I think problematic is too strong of a word, but when do we have enough and when do we call it quits for those players?
I think it's only a problem when you get too attached to it. Yeah, I would say you almost can't have too much until it starts to mess with the gameplay. Until like you find something that contradicts you in play, and you get frustrated or inflexible about it. You know, but it says in my backstory, we kind of alluded to this earlier, but I've definitely told Neal before, like if it doesn't happen in play at the table, it's not part of the campaign. Right. And I feel like that kind of applies to the backstory. Like all the backstory is well and good, but if it doesn't show up at the table, it's not really canon.
Mm-hmm. I'd say the point where it's too much is if you give your GM a backstory that they're only going to be able to get through if they have a bottle of rum at their side. Like if it's like 2 pages or something and your GM is complaining, like they're probably just a jackass, right? Like we all bitch about I bitch about 2-page backstories. But if somebody like seriously gave me a 2-page backstory, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll read it. Like I ask people, try not to do that, but if you're really attached to it, go for it. That's fine. But if you're giving like a 10-15-page backstory and your GM's like, okay, like that's the point where you're probably going a little bit far, because you're asking GMs put a lot of work into making games happen, and they have to consider a lot of factors beyond just your character, and it's very difficult for them to remember 10 to 15 pages of details in terms of things like backstory.
I don't think you can expect people to read that stuff.
Yeah, so
think of it as a reference.
Yeah, keeping it simple, like you can definitely hit the point where it's toxic for the game. And that's the point where it doesn't mesh very well with the idea that you're playing with like 4 or 5 other people at the table.
Yeah, I think the point at which your enjoyment of your character becomes more important. No, the point at which you needing to play this character in this way with this build or this concept becomes more important than enjoying the game with the other people at the table is the problem. When it turns from here's this cool idea to here's this selfish thing that I need to do, that's the tipping point for me. And there's a lot of gray zone in there, you know. Yeah. But when your needs prioritize, or the priority is the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it can also apply to what we were talking earlier about the mechanical min-maxing. It becomes a problem if there's like an asymmetry at the table. If one player has done more of XYZ than the rest. So if you've got a 19-page backstory and no one else has any, that's not going to work out. Or your character is going to become the center of the campaign, or your backstory is going to get ignored. And similarly for the min-maxing, if you're the only one at the table who's min-maxed your character and you're way more powerful than everyone else, that's going to ruin other people's fun.
I would say consider like at a certain point, maybe you're just not ready for the like if you've done very little to min-max your character, but everybody else is making like ridiculous decisions and making terrible characters deliberately, like you're not doing anything wrong, but maybe you're at the wrong table. Like it's okay to just go like, yeah, maybe I'm not a fit for this. And like
I really like
away.
that you brought that up, because I have seen people in the advice channel and Discord talking about various things, various mismatches, and I so often want to chime in and say, I think you're at the wrong table, right?
Yeah.
Like if you are more invested or less invested or want to play this way and not this way, like it's okay to not play with the same people. Like sometimes people want different things out of the game, and you kind of have two choices in that situation. Like you can either say, these are my friends and I enjoy hanging out with them, I'm going to change my expectations to more closely aligned with theirs, or say, hey guys, I love you, you're all good people, but I'm looking for a different gaming experience, I'm going to go find a different game. And that's a very valid choice to make. Like not every group is for everyone.
Yeah,
it's a social game. It's not a computer game where you've got like a set of things in front of you. It's a game where you're interacting with people, and your interactions and connections or relationships with the people at the table are going to be more important than, or more of a significant factor than any other thing going on. More important than the system, more important than the characters, than the storyline. It's how you work with the people around you. That's the core of this game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's basically just relationship advice. Like if there's something you don't like, ask yourself if it's something that you can learn to live with or work around. And if it's not, it's time to consider asking them to change or leaving. Like,
Greg, can you learn to live with the fact that you're just an unlikable evil person?
I mean,
you were supposed to laugh at that. That was a joke, Greg. I'm not. I'm so sorry. That did not work out. It's something you had said earlier. I'm sorry. Oh God, this is really not working.
I think this has been revealed a little bit by my characters I've played. I don't know. I don't
know, man. Like
we can question that.
All my characters are basically libertarians, but I make fun of libertarians in real life. So,
all right, moving on. I'm sorry, I missed your joke.
I'm so sorry, Greg. I didn't mean to insult you. I wasn't trying to hurt you.
I think there's plenty of people in chat who have already told me that. That's one of my favorite things. So, okay, there's a little bit of a side like story here. There's two different types. Well, I guess there's three different types of people. There's the vast silent majority who watch our show who don't give a fuck about me one way or the other, right? They just watch and move on, whether they liked it or didn't, whatever. They just silent majority. Mm-hmm. Then there's a small minority that sees the show and is like, oh, Greg, I really liked your role play. Your voices are funny. Hi, how are you? Sometimes they stop by my stream. I'm like, hi, I'll never see you again, but thanks for stopping by. And then there's a second subset of people who see the show and are like, I hate Greg. I need to find him. And then they like find me on Reddit or the stream or something, and they're like, your voices are terrible. They ruined the show for me. I can't watch Hardcore Heroes anymore. I hate you. Why? Like, can you just like never do a show again? Like, your Yarmir voice is offensive and racist, and we hate you. And I'm like, okay. Or they're like, you're just a mean person. I'm like, okay.
Okay, so I've had people.
Feedback
I have
Fuck
seen
those
feedback
people.
from people who didn't like me. I've never had somebody like seek me out and DM me about it before or something like
Oh,
that.
I've gotten so many DMs. I think some of it is I was in a bad mental headspace in Frozen Frontier for a while, and I was kind of a like real life asshole. And I feel bad about that. But like it affected Yarmir a little.
I think it was mostly the accent. It's very divisive.
but a lot
I personally loved it, but
a lot of
So
people really dislike my silly voices, and I kind of feel bad because I don't want to ruin shows for people, but I really like playing characters with silly voices. I'm really scared to do one that I found recently that I like, but I think it might be an accent that people find a little bit offensive.
Can we
And
hear it?
after the whole like, sure, hold on. I wasn't prepared after the focus. Hello, I am Kise. I am a storyteller from my country. I am here to find the stories of a new land and share them with my people. Right?
I'm on board, 100%.
I'm on board, but yeah, I think you would probably get a lot of
people would
angry
really tee off on that one.
Yeah. I
Whatever.
think that's
People
why.
get their panties in a bunch over all sorts of shit. Fuck those people. You do what's fun for you. You can't be getting pissed off at people for having fun in a way that you don't approve of, right? You can't be like, your fun is wrong. You're enjoying this thing, and even though you intended it just to have a different voice for a character, I'm going to project that you're being racist against all these Russians, and the poor downtrodden Russian people need to be protected from Greg's demeaning voices. Like, what sort of fucking bullshit is this? Like, Jesus Christ, let us just have some fun and play some games, kids.
Yeah. So I guess when you joke, you're like, can you just live with the fact that you're an unlikable jerk? I'm like, well, I've heard that a lot. I'm kind of learning to live with it, actually. Like once a month or so, somebody will be like, God damn it, Croak, you motherfucker. Especially since you got a newer audience from your partnership with some of the
those folks,
Destinies and the Mutants and whatever. They were much bigger than me. People will like see your new stuff and be like, hey, what's a great show, community? And people will be like, you should watch Hardcore Heroes. And I'm like, oh, somebody's gonna come hate me again. I know. And sure enough, like once a month or something, I'll get a like, God damn it.
Wow.
So anyway, okay, sorry about that. I just thought it was really funny because it tied into that joke pretty well.
Yeah.
Where were we? Narratives and backstories. So, one of the things that I find that I think a lot of people are doing nowadays, let's start backwards. Okay. One way to build out a narrative backstory that I think is interesting is something that I have both done, and I'm sure all of you have, is we want to be influenced by media. And we are like, I see, Ryan brought up Batman. I see Batman. I want to build Batman. I want to play
such a flat
Batman.
character, though.
Yeah, he is. I mean, God.
I'm sorry I use that as an example
character.
because as far as superheroes go, he's probably one of the more interesting.
He's DC's only good superhero.
Let's choose a more interesting character. I want to play Geralt. I have seen The Witcher.
Yeah.
I've played The Witcher video games. I'm inspired by this monster hunter with a little bit of magic powers and like who takes his time to find herbs and like build up. Like he learns about monsters and how they work and how they act and behave.
He's basically a D&D character.
Attack them. Yeah, he is kind of.
But he's like level 20.
He is. Yeah, he's a badass.
That's one thing I found weird about the video games is you basically start at level 20, even though you're level 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, you start out with all these magic powers and you can like kill a griffin on your first quest.
Yeah, I honestly think the Witcher
happening?
series would have been better if they didn't play with the concept of levels and experience and just made the alchemy system a core component of the game. But this is an aside. Let's go back to the discussion.
Sorry, Greg.
That's fine. That's fine. I am happy to discuss The Witcher with you guys because I just watched the television series and I feel very
same. I
more
finished
inspired.
like Friday night.
Yeah, it was good. But people take that and they say, all right, how do I make my character like this? And they do it both mechanically, but more importantly, it informs their backstory and their narrative, right? And like this is how people build their characters a lot more often in like kind of like advice columns than I am used to seeing. And there's a reason for this, and we'll get to that in a minute. But they take this thing from media that they've seen. They say, how do we play like this? And if they don't have a concept, they'll ask for one. And they'll say, hey, has anyone seen a cool ranger, a thief, a this, a that? And they're asking for that. I want to know what your perspective is on doing that. I want to know what character you've done exactly that way in the past, because we all have. And I just, let's just open discussion on how that feels in game and how healthy that is as a way to build a character narrative.
I struggle with that mentality like, so there are two ways that you can approach that, right? If somebody's asking, like, give me, okay, so like Aragorn, should I be thinking like Aragorn here? And when they ask that, they could be saying like, okay, so when Aragorn sees a problem, this is how he approaches it, right? Somebody's injured, King's Foil. There's an enemy that needs fighting, pull out the sword, right? Like, it could be like a mechanical way of informing their play, which is fine. That's great. That's actually a really good idea. Like D&D maps a lot of characters to archetypes, so letting people think in that term is a good way to sort of get somebody a grounding in the game. When people start thinking about it on a narrative level, though, and they're like, okay, like Aragorn, so I need to have like an elven love interest, and I need to be 110 or wait, 80. Is he like 80? I don't know, whatever. Like I need to have all these components to my character. That's where I start to get a little bit concerned, because you're not playing that character. And I feel like D&D tends to work better with less romanticized characters in general. I don't know, like in the Wheel of Time, like Rand is one of my favorite characters, right? I would never try to play Rand as a character.
I would argue you play Rand every time you start at level 1. You're a sheep herder that picked up a sword. For
I'm talking more. My favorite section of Rand is when he's like the conqueror slowly descending into madness. Like that's my favorite arc for Rand.
My favorite arc for him is actually the one that I'm not sure you've gotten to yet, where he's hit his lowest point and now he's
I'm past that. I'm on the last book and I'm just struggling to finish it.
Ooh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Of course, Wheel of Time came up. Of course.
It wouldn't be a Greg and Sean show without Wheel of Time.
I guess my point is, like, those characters had their own story. Like, D&D, I feel like this kind of goes back to the whole making minimalist characters approach. It works better with less romanticized and less complicated character concepts that you can inform through play. So when you want to build your character based off of an example from a mechanical perspective, that's great, because that helps new people learn the game. It helps people get a grounding when they're making a new character and they're not really sure what they want to play. That's fine. But from a story perspective, keep it simple, because I see a lot of people try to emulate a character from a movie or a TV show that they like, and it doesn't map well, because role-playing games don't really have stories. The story is made as you play.
It's the same thing that we were talking about earlier. It's the focus on the goal instead of the journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you try and make a character based on, or make a PC based on a fictional character, you're missing a lot of the scope and the scale. So sort of what I said earlier, like Geralt of Rivia feels very much like a D&D character. So does Aragorn, but like they're level 20 D&D characters.
Yeah.
So that's fine as inspiration, but depending on the campaign you're playing, you're playing what was Geralt like when he was level 1.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot you can do with like taking concepts. Like you could play Geralt and be like, I want to take the idea of being this person that everyone kind of hates, but is useful to keep around because he's skilled at doing this thing. Like that's a thing you could do. I guess I kind of did that with Ferris. But like you can take concepts from a character, just don't try and pull them wholesale.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, we've seen a lot of kind of negativity on this concept here, but I think it's a valid way to create a character. I think as long as you're not trying to directly mimic and become Batman.
Yeah.
Right. I built a bard once upon a time. And are you familiar with the Chronicles of Peridian?
No.
Did you see the Disney movie called The Black Cauldron?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As a child.
Didn't we watch that movie a whole bunch of times as kids?
So the Black Cauldron,
I don't remember it very much, but
the Black Cauldron is loosely based on the second book in that series, called The Black Cauldron. And it is I think, foundationally good children's fantasy series. Like if you are a young reader and you're going to begin your journey down fantasy, I would read it before Tolkien. It's very good for young readers. But I have a bard in there. His name is Fluter Flam. And he is... Don't laugh at Fluter's a badass, okay?
A badass named Fluter?
Fluter Flam is a king of a country who doesn't want to be king. He just wants to be a bard. He's terrible at it, and he lies all the time. And he has a magic harp string that can never break, except for when he tells an untruth. And he's a side character. He's, you know how you get a party of characters around the main ones? He's kind of like there, and he's important, but he's not the main character. That's Fluter Flam. And that is how I made my first bard character. I've always been a fan of bards, and I wanted to make one, but I didn't know how. And I just took the blueprint of Fluter Flam, and I just made that my character. I spoke kind of like him, and I had the same penchant for telling untruths and running away and not taking responsibility, and that was the kind of backbone of my first bard character, Garrett. And Garrett Goldenthroat was basically my introduction into Dungeons and Dragons, and I played him through 18 levels, got thrown off Mount Olympus, and was one of my absolute favorite characters of all time. And I think it's very healthy to take that as like the backbone of the character. I wasn't trying to be Fluter Flam, but in like character arc and like direct story details and power. But that was I was like, I'm going to roleplay this character as if I were Fluter. Like if Fluter had been magically transported here and he had these powers on my character sheet, how would he respond? And I think that that's a more valid way of playing than I think that we've given it credit for, right? I think as long as you're taking it as kind of like an inspirational direction rather than a this is who I am direction, like verbatim, no compromise. I think it's very good, and I just kind of wanted to share that perspective as well, because I think that this is not a wrong way of making a character. I just think that the caution is use it to inspire your own role play and your own story, rather than trying to force a different narrative into your game that you're playing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I have a habit of being very skeptical when these things get brought up.
Like somebody will come up with a new idea and I'll say, okay, how could I break this? that tends to be how I approach things. But yeah, no, I fundamentally agree with you. That's fine.
My first D&D character was Tasselhoff Burfoot, the kleptomaniac halfling thief. I would not recommend ripping off wholesale characters from other editions, but I was 12, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking of when Greg was talking was I haven't thought this idea through, so I'm going to be workshopping this with you here. What do you think about the idea of consider the character and whether or not you can imagine them having a story that is decoupled from the main narrative of the media that you're taking them from? Like, I can't imagine decoupling Aragorn from the story of Lord of the Rings and putting them on separate journeys that have nothing to do with the story of Lord of the Rings. But I can imagine that with, like Geralt of Rivia. Geralt is a character I can imagine doing day-to-day life as a Witcher. I can imagine somebody making an effective character like Geralt because I can imagine him doing stories other than the story of the Witcher series. And I feel like that's kind of important. Like, is there space for this character to do things that haven't already been explored? I think is a question to ask there. And that's why I thought Fluter worked, because Fluter apparently was like a side character who didn't have like there's a lot of like unknowns was kind of the sound.
So is the actual character in the book called Fluter? This is
yes, Fluter Flam.
And he's a king named Fluter, King Fluter.
Yeah, so the books are based very specifically in Welsh mythology, and so there are a lot of Welsh names. Fluter is, I think, actually like a actual Welsh character in fiction. Fluter Flam. Hold on, let me look him up. But yes, there are many. This is the same book that gives you like Iwany, Gwendolyn. Right, lots of Welsh names.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I got
something else I wanted to say, but I don't remember. Go ahead, Neal.
I was going to change the topic unless someone else wants to finish something on this.
I want to touch on one more thing.
Go for it.
I'm sorry. This was kind of the point of bringing all of this up so that we could come full circle to. I recently saw in the advice Discord someone asking, hey, I haven't seen a show recently where anyone has played a paladin. I'm going to roll up a paladin soon. Will somebody please link me a D&D show where someone has played a paladin? I want to make a character. And I've seen that happen way more often with the kind of boom of online games, specifically Critical Role, but also there are a myriad of others that people are taking inspiration from.
Right.
And it just felt, I immediately said, like, kind of regretfully, I was like, just make a paladin. You don't need to see anyone else play. And then, like, I kind of felt bad because I remember taking Fluter Flam as kind of some inspiration and the, like, great character I made from there. And it felt so off and weird to me. I wanted to get your perspective on that. And talk about potentially the pitfalls of watching somebody else play a character and using that as the backbone of the character that you want to play, as well as maybe what positives we could pull out of it, although I have a hard time to think of them myself as easily as, say, a piece of fiction.
So my biggest concern with that is not every GM runs the game the same way, and worlds often vary wildly. Especially with something like the Paladin, which is so close to the Cleric, that GMs all kind of had their own answers on why is the Paladin different from the Cleric? Because these two things are not the same class, they are different things. What differentiates them in your world? And that's a question that different GMs will have different answers to. So my biggest concern is that somebody's going to inform how their character should be from a reference that probably isn't reliable. But I think the bigger issue is that D&D really sucks at giving people evocative ways to think about a character archetype. Like, it gives you a bag of stats in 5th edition for what the Paladin is, but it really sucks at giving you a broad image of, like, you're playing a Paladin, here's what you can be expecting to do. And if D&D did a better job of introducing you to the class concepts, and, like, giving you really good imagery about the kinds of ways you can expect to play that character, people probably wouldn't feel the need to look up references and examples as much.
Okay, I think that's very fair. I think that one of the things that I would like to see from especially the Dungeon Master's Guide, but from the core books in general, is specifically, this is generally how we expect you to play. There are, obviously with the caveat of, there are thousands of ways to play Dungeons and Dragons, none of which are inherently wrong, but we designed the rules with this intention. And I think that just kind of language, maybe an example, maybe just an explanation of, like, ultimately the reason you bought the rules is so that you know how to play. And then from there, you're going to grow and adapt into your own style and way of doing things. But having that kind of starter step, I think, would be very helpful. And getting that from watching other people play is not a terrible idea. It feels to me like I would rather teach myself. And maybe that's just a personal preference than it is a standard truth.
No, I think you're completely right, because it's a creative game, right? This isn't a paint by numbers picture that we're doodling here. It's a game about ingenuity.
Ingenuity, yeah.
That's the word, ingenuity. It's a game about coming up with your own ideas. It's a problem-solving game. So why would you be like, I'm just going to copy this other person's character? Like, you're supposed to be here to fuel your own creative fires and passions and do fun things. And maybe if you really don't give a shit about your character, you can copy something, but you don't need to watch a show to do that. You can just be like, well, take this class, this, and this. Who cares? Move on, right? But you're supposed to be digging into this creative juice, or maybe not supposed to be, but that's, for me, the fun is the exploration, the creation, the unlimited options. I wouldn't want to follow someone else's footsteps.
So
to be fair to this perspective, I'll say that I don't think this is fundamentally that different from the idea of pulling characters from other media, like pulling a character you like from a book as an inspiration point. That's fine. Just note that things aren't going to map 1-to-1, and you probably don't want to rip them off wholesale. Like, yeah, it's totally fine to have references and examples to work off of.
It's
so that's
totally
okay.
great to have inspiration, absolutely. But to be like, well, I need to see some other paladins so I know what to do is wonky. You know, maybe if you found another paladin already that is interesting, that seems fine. But I don't know. I guess maybe I just wouldn't want to watch a whole bunch of things for inspiration on one character. But I suppose maybe people might want that, I guess.
I get it. Because paladins, D&D is not as straightforward as I think we all think it is. Like, we all are very well versed in the like language of it and the knowledge of it now. But I think a lot of people will hear like, you're a cleric, and they'll be like, cool, what's a cleric? Right? Like, a lot of people don't know what these things mean or what they represent. And that's kind of where I'm coming back to bragging on WotC for how they handled 5th edition. Like, I don't think they do enough to really sell what things are in the fiction of the world. So when people say, I want a reference for what a paladin is, can somebody link me to what a paladin, somebody who played a paladin in another game? They're saying, I don't really understand what this is supposed to represent. Like, I see a bunch of stats, but I see the numbers and my brain glosses over and turns to goo.
That's why you read the 5 paragraphs on the paladin page about what a paladin is.
But it's bad. It's so bad. WotC's fiction and prose is so painful to read, and it's stiff and boring, and it's not good.
That's why you dial up your DM and you're like, hey DM,
yeah,
what are paladins in your world?
That's the other thing I was gonna say is ask your GM, be like, hey, what's a paladin? Like, what can I expect to be if I make a paladin? And let them, because then you get like better reference. Maybe not like a good example, but you're gonna get a better reference because you know that it's gonna fit into the game that you're playing.
All right. I think Closing in chat has said a number of things like watching a D&D show is much like any other form of narrative, right? It's no different than taking inspiration from Flute or Flam from a book or a movie or a cartoon that you like. But I think that a key difference to me is the characters in other fiction aren't being actively role-played by somebody else. Right. I guess there's an actor there, but they're not role playing the way that you're going to be role playing. Right. When you watch Sean play Ferris and you go, man, I really like the way he did these things. Right. Like, I want to incorporate that into my gameplay. Right. I feel like what you're doing is not necessarily taking inspiration from the character Ferris, but you're copying Sean role-playing a character. And that's the part that I think I have the disconnect with. And I feel like it's a very, very, very hard to disassociate the character from the like role-play example, and that is being provided.
Yeah. That's something I struggle with GMing as well, is I will see somebody as a GM do something that I really like, and I want to incorporate that into like my general toolbox, but I have to morph it into something that I can do because I don't run games the same way that other people do. And I just, my brain doesn't work the same way, right? So I kind of have to change things up a little bit and kind of bastardize other people's approaches in order to turn it into something that works for me.
All right. I'm glad we touched on that. I wanted to bring it up as it was definitely the kind of inspiration of talking about the different ways that we wanted to build characters and have done it in the past.
All right. Well, I got a question for you all. How do you feel about the issue? Well, 2 things. First one, broadly, how do you feel about the issue of retconning mistakes? And secondly, do you guys ever have people coming up to you being like, technically in this episode you missed your +1, so you actually would have died right there, and they like going back and like, you know, taking the time to actually see all the mistakes that happen in the game and report every little possible error? How do you guys feel about that?
I don't care. So one thing that I thought about, like, okay, first off, there are going to be inconsistencies in the game that just
it happens. No, especially when you go with the sort of like minimalist play to see what happens approach that we do. Like there's going to be those sorts of inconsistencies and things are going to change because everybody's kind of figuring out the game at the same time as the viewers. I would say don't retcon, live with the fact that there's going to be some plot holes and some inconsistencies. I think one of the ones that I know about existing is I think Ferris was a lot more like open to the idea of torture when the campaign first started, because I was like, yeah, this guy's a jackass, why not? And then around the midway point of the campaign, I was like, Ferris is ethically opposed to torture. Like, this guy is not okay with that.
Around the midway point of the campaign, you're like, God, Yaramir's an asshole. I don't want to be like him at all. We're not ethically opposed to that.
I really want to torture Yaramir, but he's on my team. Maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah, so I think I put it in. I thought it was a nice little bit of nuance as well to like Ferris, the guy who indiscriminately will eat anything regardless of what it was in life, to the idea of Ferris is more compassionate to living creatures than a lot of other people in the world were. But I know that was an inconsistency because he was definitely not that way at the early point of the campaign. But like, fuck it. Who cares? I guess it might piss Mitaki off because he does so much work in maintaining the wiki, and then suddenly the wiki has an inconsistency in it. But like, sorry. You have to live with it.
Yeah, I try not to read YouTube comments because they're usually, or they have a high percentage of just people bitching about stuff. But that's one of the things that comes up often in it. There's always someone who's like, well, Ferris should have gotten a -4 here, and Krob should have survived this blast because technically he has got a +1 to the save because he's actually a half gnome and blah 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 or whatever. You know,
I was a half gnome all along. Yes.
Clearly, I don't have real working examples off the top of my head. I'm kind of making stuff up, and
more often than not, they're wrong. I mean, we definitely do make mistakes, but very seldom do I see viewers catching those +1s that we haven't already thought of. But occasionally we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I would hesitate.
Sorry.
I would hesitate to make any hard and fast rule. Like in general, I would say don't retcon and just kind of roll with it. But we definitely have retconned. The example that's popping to mind, there was a fight with Georg where we forgot like a +1 on the magic missiles. And so like he didn't do enough damage, so the other wizard survived and killed him, and it got complicated. Retconning was weird. So I mean, and I liked how we handled that. Like we didn't like rewind time. We kind of rolled it into the narrative and was like, okay, instead of being at negative whatever, you're at 0, you wake up on the battlefield. This is the new story now, right?
Yeah, that worked out well.
It seemed unfair to be like, you're dead because we forgot this extra damage that we missed. But it also would have been weird to like re-roll the whole fight. So we found a smooth way to keep the narrative going.
Yeah,
I would defer to the narrative, to the story, to having fun over any hard and fast rule about never retconning or it's fine to retcon.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said for the window of opportunity. If you just make an attack and the attack resolves and you do your damage and now it's the enemy's turn and the DM's describing what the enemy's going to do and you're like, hold on, I forgot my +1 to damage from my gloves of war, the DM can be like, okay, 1 extra damage is fine. But if it's like 2 rounds later, hold on, there should have been 1 extra damage, and no, fuck it. At that point, you know, I feel like
I think that there's a shelf life on retcons, right? And I think that's exactly the window of opportunity is exactly what I was going to kind of get at. But I do think there's kind of like 2 types of retcons. There's the like silly mechanical +1s, right? And then there's the kind of narrative defining retcons, like
what?
My character was down and he should not have been, and this changed the scope of this combat, or like my character actually had the staff of X, Y, and Z on him, which granted him passage through the elves, but we forgot about that and now we're dead.
Some of those I feel like are even weirder to like, you forgot the NPC.
And I
like,
think that there.
Oh shit! I guess your vizier has been following you around the whole time through all these dungeons. Whoops.
Yeah.
Or like, I guess you somehow had a horse. And
I think that there's a shelf life on those, right? Like, so mechanical ones might be around, or it might be a single combat, and by the time the combat's over, you kind of have put it down. Like, if you get past the expiration date on the retcon, then just don't. You lost it. but bringing it up politely in a round or two makes a lot of sense. I think that the same thing is true of I forgot my horse. If you forgot your horse like 20 minutes ago and we're like halfway through the dungeon, like, okay, tell me how you got your horse through here and now it's here and we'll take it into play. But like, if we forgot your horse 2 sessions ago and now we're like halfway or 3/4 of the way through the dungeon, your horse was left outside, we'll deal with it later, or your horse ran away or something.
Yeah, my favorite thing is to it doesn't work. It's not going to work with like new players or with everyone, but my favorite thing is to punish players for those sorts of mistakes. Be like, oh, you forgot your gold on your character sheet, or you forgot to write down your treasure, guess you lost it. You forgot your horse, guess they're dead somewhere. Like, your character has that realization, oh crap, where's my horse?
I try to be a little bit more understanding, because people tend to move at a much faster pace. Like, you move in narrative time, right? So it's much easier for there to be those sorts of clerical mistakes. But I do have the bit of like, oh, you didn't write your treasure down? Guess your character lost it. I think
that's why that you should have kind of like a window in your head. And I think it's probably different for the severity of the retcon we're talking about, but like for treasure, like I think there's a reasonable window of like, oh, you forgot to write down your treasure. It was 9 gems of blue and silver and this amount of art and this, and here you go. And there's a certain level of like, oh, you forgot your treasure. It's gone now. And I think just as a DM, what I would do is just think of different situations as kind of generic tent poles, kind of like difficulty values in 5e. Like, this is an easy retcon. It is DC 5, so its window is, right, like 1 round or 8 rounds of combat or something, or the entire combat. This DC is very difficult. It's like DC 20. Like, this retcon is like the exact action. Like, oh shit, I'm sorry, I also forgot this. Or like, we moved on, so like it's already lost, right? I think just having kind of some basic windows in your head that you can compare the situation to as it comes up in play and be like, yeah, I think, we missed this like 2-3 rounds ago, let's go ahead and add it in. Or like, no, I think that time's passed, we're just going to move on with play. And I think having some just examples in your head to look to, I think will make that retconning experience a lot easier.
I was just gonna say, every retcon you make by its nature is going to create some dissonance in the narrative for people's brains to they have to wrap their head around it. But it can also lead to more satisfying resolutions for people, or it can make people feel like they weren't cheated out of something. So you kind of need to weigh the dissonance that you're making against the outcome of doing the retcon, and just kind of make a personal call on whether or not you think it's worth it.
Yeah, will the retcon solve more problems than it creates, or the other way around, right? Yeah. Is the retcon making more dissonance, or is it alleviating dissonance? Because it makes more sense to say, okay, the horse is tied up outside, rather than
having to rewrite half the dungeon or something. But and it's just kind of, find something that works at the table. There's no hard and fast rule. Like, when people talk about the shelf life for retcons and how it has an expiration date, it's because the further away you are, the more dissonance you create. And
but those are just guidelines.
Yeah,
and you're not going to die if you eat yogurt 2 days past its best by date.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, just you kind of make a judgment call every time you do it. Am I okay with the dissonance that I'm making in order to resolve whatever I broke?
And there's something to be said, because this is sort of, the retcons are in the same vicinity as like character mistakes. Ryan was talking about you explaining retcons as character mistakes, and that's something that comes up with some frequency, where someone will declare an action and then be like, wait a minute, that was a mistake. And the DM might be like, well, let's move on. And people can find a lot of dissonance with that and say like, well, my character wouldn't have made that mistake because they are, XYZ, which I am not. And that becomes a really awkward area, because when you're sitting back in the ease of your home, it's really easy to have this notion of a perfect play where no one ever makes any mistakes. But the world turns on weird, strange quirks, like, Archduke Franz Ferdinand stopping at a cafe because his car stops for whatever reason. That whole going back out and getting killed again. There's weird coincidences and things and weird mistakes that people make throughout their lives that have really changed massive events. And I think there's an aversion to embracing character mistakes, and I think we should embrace our character mistakes. If you forget your horse, you don't have your horse, and that's now a feature, not a bug. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that just weird rambling?
And I don't like that mentality either, where people are like, oh, my character wouldn't do this because they're really smart, even though I'm not necessarily that smart. And it's like, well, yeah, and my Dark Souls character wouldn't have leapt off that sheer cliff face to their death, but they did it anyways. Maybe the game should just play itself for me. Like,
I'd be happy with the Dark Souls that played itself. I can't beat anything. I swear to God.
I guess this is one thing that I actually like about Lamentations of the Flame Princess was how they explicitly call out the mental stats. Like, intelligence is how well your character can learn new abstract information like languages, and that's it. It specifically and explicitly calls out it does not affect how well your character can reason through problems in game. That's left up to the player, and I love that. I love that idea of it's your responsibility to mentally play your character, and intelligence is just this representation of something that you don't have an immediate window into, like playing at the table. It's basically a way of mechanizing an abstraction.
Greg's thinking.
Yeah.
Well, I think, as with all things, it's a gradient and not a black
agreed.
and white. I don't think it's something to say, well, like, all character mistakes are features and not bugs. But
certainly,
it's a gradient that's hard to clarify, and I think it's something that you have to use a lot of just judgment on.
Yeah, and it also is like, what kind of game do you prefer? I think it's why I dislike 5e so much, is just how everything is determined by your character stats and die rolls. Like, the idea of investigation and perception as skill rolls just kind of frustrate me.
I made a fix to that, a non-mechanical, purely narrative fix to try to address that, so people would do less die rolling and more description investigation. And I basically have told all of my tables in recent years of 5e that I will forego any investigation, any like charisma check, any intimidation check if you find the thing with narrative first. If you are looking for a trapdoor and you move a desk and find it, you have found it. There's no roll, right? If you are looking for a crack in a window and you're clever with like sand or water and it runs, like, if you do the thing, you will find it, period. No roll, no anything. And if you are looking and what you described to me wouldn't naturally find it, then we'll roll for it, right? And so I've just basically given them a fiat natural 20 if you describe to me what you do and it would work. And that has not been a cure-all, or particularly like now everything we do is 100% narrative all the time. We still have situations where people are like, I roll investigation. But it has at least encouraged people to think about how they might be interacting with the world so that they get that natural kind of like automatic success. And I find that to be a productive way of approaching these things. And I think that something similar could be done for any die roll in D20 in 5th edition.
Yeah, I'm down with that. And then it turns the die rolls, like making an investigation check is what you do when you just want to move on with the game, right? Like, you don't want to slow it down and really like dig deep into the narrative of this random room looking for the trapdoor. You just go, all right, let's just search and see if there's anything in this room. And that's what you do when you just kind of want to cruise along. Yeah, I like that. That helps a lot.
That's nice.
And it gives the players a bit of an option too. I think you just said this, so I'm stupid. Okay. But I like the idea that a player character in a persuasion situation can be they can attempt to persuade someone themselves, or they can just be like, this particular situation is not important enough, or I don't like have the desire to attempt that right now. I roll dice.
Let's not get into the charisma discussion, because then I will rant
dice
about that stat for 50 minutes and we'll go way over time.
Yeah. So in the Hardcore Heroes recently, this thing has come up, this battle with this containment field, And one of the facets of this is that there's this river canyon that the containment field doesn't really cover. And immediately,
Is there actually
everyone
salt over this?
Oh my god, there's
Is it in
so
Twitch
much
chat?
salt.
I saw salt.
Everyone's like,
hilarious.
how could people not notice the river canyon? Oh my
There's
god.
hundreds and hundreds and
People
hundreds of
are
messages.
shitting themselves
that are
over
just
this
so
thing.
salty.
I'm fine with it. Like
I know.
the way I interpreted it is that when we made that barrier, it accounts for elevation differences, but that canyon just went too deep, right? It went way deeper than anyone expected it to, and it left a gap. And I'm fine with that. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and I think thank you for saying that. It's one of these things where, like, you know, a general invades a country and then, like, oh, here's this thing that we forgot about and now the enemy is counterattacking in this way. And in that sort of situation, like, you've got a general and all of his advisors and all of the people he, like, that report down, that feed information up, and you've got, like, an entire nation working on this battle plan, and there's still, like, a flaw or a mistake. And here we've got, like, 2 clerics who don't live over there and just are looking at, like, a top-down map trying to decide a plan, and like clearly it's not going to be perfect and there's going to be a little flaw. And I thought that was fun and interesting, and I'm glad that you thought it was interesting, and hopefully it contributes to a more fun game. But there's so many people who are just like, that's impossible, how could people make a mistake like that, it's so obvious. But at the same time, no one was
listened
like,
to your feedback. Nick and Sean won Dungeons and Dragons. Campaign.
They won Dungeons and Dragons.
No mistakes.
Honestly, my hope is that
Perfect
Van
game.
survives this. My goal for Van is for him to eventually die to Arcadia's next big up and comer over a dispute over whose carriage has what right of way on the road. Like, that's my hope.
who's a palanquin full of shirtless men has the right of way.
Yeah, I want it to be like getting killed by the next hero in like a really stupid argument.
Yeah. I had to get that off my chest because there was so much salt about it. That's why I was talking about mistakes and retconning and.
That's hard. I don't know. I wasn't watching chat. I caught the
my
VOD
only thing with
later,
it was I assumed that it was going to be like a sphere, because otherwise they could just dig under the barrier. But I assume that there's probably some sort of safeguard.
No, that's what I was thinking as I was listening. I was like, "Is this a dome? Oh my god, it's a dome!" But like that's fun, right? I mean, and that gives
honestly,
you something to do next in the campaign. Like, what did they think
like,
it was just going to be perfect seal, demon problem solved, game over?
Check. No more having to worry about this thing ever again.
Like, we were pretty abstract over how exactly it was going to work, and I just kind of went like, all right, I trust Neal kind of gets what I'm trying to make here, right? And he's not going to like screw me with something. He has to
find
really
something.
stupid.
And if you thought of this, he would have to find another hole to poke and give you the next encounter, the next challenge. Otherwise, the game doesn't go on.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Nick is arriving in the last 5 minutes of the show.
I mean, we could always go over.
Always go over.
He's salty. He's like, Malachi's way too smart to have missed this canyon.
Nick is just in here to yell at Neal over the canyon.
Hi, Nick.
What's up, Nick?
Hey, Nick. Welcome.
Do you have something to say on this topic?
I'm alright with it. Yeah, I was more worried about what people were saying about like, what does that mean they could just dig under it? But Sean's right. If it goes like 10 feet down, and it's just further.
Yeah, I assume that there's some sort of safeguard against that. Like, because if it was,
I think you fucked up. I think you need to build a whole other
we need to do an inverted quest spell.
Build another barricade upside down.
You could do that. Maybe I was thinking that if you could like recast the spell but invert the sphere.
Yeah, like because if it's just they could just dig under the barrier, like that's stupid enough where I'd be like, come on, Neal, like we didn't work out every
if it
detail,
was
but
just at ground level and they just like dig a little bit and crawl under, that would be the dumbest thing in the world, right?
Yeah. But like I especially like the idea of just like the canyon goes really deep and there's like a crack that the demons are able to fall through. Like that's fine.
It's hundreds of feet deep, so there's now room for.
This were a TV show that totally would have been what happens. And like the episode ends with like the barrier goes up, and then there's a shot of the canyon and the demon finding the little gap in the wall and crawling through.
Oh,
and
yeah,
ominous music
definitely.
plays.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the anime like ending credits already, like over the top of the demon like getting out.
Yeah, and don't forget, like, this is still supposed to be like a temporary stopgap measure. Like, the goal here is that we seal them off for long enough for us to convince the wizard airship to crash itself.
It's never gonna happen. All right. There are very few right and wrong answers in D&D. This is a wrong answer.
But
we just
we might,
so
I mean,
okay.
we
Here's my
witnessed-
question, Neal. Solipsism, right? Solipsism
Fucking
is not
that
real
spell.
to other people, but it should be real to inanimate objects. So if we smashed it into the Temple of Heatstroke using a solipsism spell,
Ooh.
would we destroy
Solipsism
the temple?
is weird. Okay, so here's a question for you. What happens if you're standing in the rain? You solipsism an umbrella for yourself, but
Yes.
somebody else is blind and deaf and have no idea that they've cast this, and they're sitting at your knees. Does the water hit them?
Wow.
Magic. They get a saving throw, right?
Yeah,
Or
but
whatever
so
it
does
is.
that mean
I think
reality is
the
relative
water-
and Sean
Yes.
doesn't get water
Yes,
on
I
him, but
think
the
magic
other
is-
person
yes,
I
does?
think the umbrella protects me and the water hits them.
Yeah.
So
I think I would agree with
okay,
that, depending on, or
now-
maybe they pass their save or whatever, and it protects both of them.
Same
But-
thing. You have a solipsismed iron umbrella. Someone drops a like +5 sword down on top of you. You've got the solipsism umbrella, so it hits you and bounces to the side. The other person doesn't have the solipsism umbrella. The +5 sword then comes down and lands at their feet. Where is the sword? Is it at their feet or is it to your side?
Well, it's in
Solipsism's a
both.
fucked up spell.
No, it's easy. It's
I
easy.
think-
It's in both places simultaneously until you observe and measure it.
I mean, if it's actually a +5 sword, I would need to resolve how if it pierces the solipsism. Like
Replace
that-
+5 sword with a rock then. Like, we have
Okay.
an issue where solipsism
I think you
triggers
could use
multiple
solipsism
realities.
Getting into quantum
to
mechanics
deflect
now.
The rock occupies both spaces simultaneously until you can observe and measure it. And then once you quit observing and measuring it, it now reoccupies both
Well,
of said spaces.
what I'm
Ryan,
saying
as
is that
our
you can have
resident
two
physics
separate
expert,
observations.
Can you weigh in on this?
Each observation
No,
is
I
independent of
cannot.
each other.
Okay, Ryan, what if you're dropping iron oxide nanoparticles onto a person and they bounce away? Then what happens?
then everyone gets cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. The iron umbrella only just protects you from
So-
the particles until they kill you with cancer.
Okay, now Tiltarax in chat is saying, I think inanimate stuff would ignore the umbrella and just go through it regardless. But then why doesn't the palanquin that Van makes just immediately fall through the earth? Because it should be ignoring the inanimate object that is the ground beneath it.
Yeah.
Clearly,
I
the
think in
Earth
this
is
case,
alive.
I mean, it's magic. You don't need to make it logically consistent. I would go with whatever
So,
makes
here's my
sense or
thought.
is most interesting. I think it's a cool image to have the priest with the solipsism umbrella deflecting the raindrops while someone else underneath it doesn't believe and they get wet.
Yeah. Well, here's my
And
thinking.
I could see using that as a shield to deflect a rock.
Yeah.
I could also see the rock going right through it.
Here's the thought: the sword gets dropped on the umbrella or the sword bounces away. The other person spontaneously has a wound appear on their foot where the sword landed. Reality kind of converges back into a single agreed upon state, but then that person still has the injury. So the timeline splits and then it merges back together. It forces itself to resolve.
I hate
Yeah,
solipsism
you,
for these reasons.
If you didn't know
such
that,
a
you'd
pain.
think that maybe they didn't think it all the way through. When they
Oh,
came
that's
up with
every
that spell.
D&D spell.
That's weighty chest right off the bat.
Oh, I love weighty
It's
chest.
fire trap right off the bat. All
What if it
these
creates
problems.
multiple universes in which one universe the sword kills the man and one universe it doesn't, and then we choose which one we occupy?
Yeah, but then you still have to deal with the issue that he's getting protection from a spell that he isn't believing in. That doesn't trigger for him. I don't know.
In this universe, that works. This is why we
guess.
occupy it. If we
I'm
didn't
hearing-
occupy that universe, then he died from the sword.
But if that's how it
But there
works,
is a
right,
universe in which he lives.
If that's how it works, Greg, right? What happens if you do the umbrella thing, right? The guy who is casting the solipsism spell, he goes into the alternative universe where he doesn't get wet. But because the other person doesn't believe in the umbrella, he's forced to occupy the universe where he does get wet, causes the party to split. And it's just like a
Ooh,
useless
and then
spell.
we have
Now
two
they
different
have-
campaigns, like Other Side and Arcadia.
Yeah, one has the NPC part, and one has the
Solipsism
NPC.
creates a new campaign.
Solipsism created campaign. I love it.
Ugh.
Look, the solipsism spell is kind of
pretty
annoying.
I love solipsism
am
so much.
totally with Neal on this one.
I love that so. I just love the fact that I was able to make a palanquin full of shirtless, or being
Oh
carried
my
by a
God.
team of shirtless men. Like that was
Yeah,
that was
That's
pretty
really the
bomb.
best use of it, right? The use is for doing silly things outside of mechanically important situations. That's the real intent of the spell, I feel like.
Your obsession with using it for the Palanquin, Sean, is probably the most like cleric-based RP that Van's done. As a, for the whole campaign.
So beautiful.
I feel like I should get XP every time I do it because I'm casting a spell that furthers my god's ethos.
So Neal, but what with the canyon, right? So what's the deal if it's got a river going down it? How are they going to attack us through a river?
Well, it's not like the canyon is not filled with a river. Have you ever looked at a canyon in person before? Usually the water doesn't like flood the canyon from wall to wall. I know you don't have
don't have a lot of canyons in the UK.
Yeah, and you don't strike me as a particularly outdoorsy type. No offense. Well. But yeah, usually you'll have like a canyon system. The river will be pushed off to the left side or the right side, and then during the high tides or the rainy season, when the water level goes up, then it might span. From
so
wall
how
to
wide's
wall.
this canyon then?
I haven't finished building the map. I think it's
we'll
gonna
find
be...
out when we die next time, which is
We're
going to be.
not gonna die.
We still have a while, I think, before we.
I just want to at this point as well mention that last time we used Cloud Claw on the Warrior Demons, they died without a save. Maybe they've absorbed a little bit more power, and now the bull didn't. No, but the warrior guys did. I think there must have been 5 hit die. But,
so that will, if we save that a little bit, that might be an amazing spell in a pinch combined with Wind Servant. I mean, it's not going to clear the encounter, but it's going to be a fucking lifesaver. Like we're gonna need that.
I don't know if it's just worth doing that as the opening move.
Probably not.
Saving all the other spells for the high level stuff that's not going to die from it.
I feel like if we did it really early, they would just wait for the cloud kill to end.
Been thinking about this. It's a tough one.
So I think we want to wait for the engagement, and then at some point, Van and Malachi like pull back tens of feet to throw out the cloud kill, and then we just start swarming through them with it.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. We'll figure something out. We'll think strategy when we actually see the map, probably.
Yeah. And I got some more tricks up my sleeve still. So
yeah,
I know you do.
I got a lot of them.
It'll be a shock if you ever manage to kill Nick. Like, I think he's invincible.
Really? He's got so little HP.
I think.
But his characters never die. Like,
okay, I think
the closest he's ever gotten is when a trapdoor spider bit him. But then, like, ban the rules.
But then we retconned it, and he didn't. I don't know. I feel like Malachi will never die to something directly trying to kill him, but he will eventually die to like the collateral damage of something else that wasn't even trying to hit him.
Yeah, probably.
Like he'll die from being on the edge of somebody else's breath weapon that was intended to hit a fighter or something like that.
That's how we ever fight like another level 9 wizard. I'm pretty much just dead immediately. Like magic missile, game over. All right, because they'd be smart enough to just do it as well. They'd be like, okay, well, I cast magic missile on the wizard. Oh, he's only like 18 health. Okay, he's dead.
Yeah. I hope you're all in a spot to accept the success or death of your characters.
Whoa, Neal.
Because
you can't be
I
saying
ain't
that.
pulling any punches for you guys, right?
Nick's retiring.
This is not the characters are going to survive no matter what mission.
Honestly, this is a pretty cool way to go if it doesn't work out. Like if this is how the characters drop, that's fine.
You would be dying doing a great service to your nation and your people and the whole world.
Yeah, I do wonder this just a little bit, like on a side note. Nick, do you ever envision a situation where you retire the character? Or are you hell-bent on keeping this wizard all the way? Because it does kind of feel like this is the kind of climax of your story so far. Like, would this be, like, the resolution of the demons? Would this be a fitting end to the story of Malachi? Or are you like, no.
Well,
this bitch is going to Olympus.
From a player point of view, it's a decent way to retire him. But from a character point of view, I just don't know. Like, I could see William retiring. Like, I think he would have retired at the end of Fro if we just got back safely. That I could have been happy with that. But I just can't imagine Malachi not trying to keep.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. It's a little more complicated now since Van's married, but I think Van's in the same boat of like next stop is to go kill the red dragon in Mistrea.
Yeah,
and then start mining Mithril. Right, like there's a lot of other shit to do. But I think Van's gonna Van's gonna adventure till he dies.
I would be content with retiring the character as an important NPC or something like that. Like getting to the point like, okay, so he's going to settle down in this area now. and continue doing stuff, but going to be more stationary. And I'll say to Neal, like, okay, well, I'm not going to play him anymore. You can have him as an NPC. I'd be happy with that because then he'd still be around.
I would be cool with retiring Van and having him become a family man if there was like a future campaign for that kid that he blessed and he became like an advisor or something to her.
Yes. Yeah,
that'd be cool.
I could see a campaign in the future with Van's beautiful baby, right? Some sort of
Van's sexy baby.
God damn it, Nick.
You're never gonna let this down.
Thing was hilarious. Oh my god.
Yeah.
The best part is I kind of got it spoiled for me before I actually saw that episode in the chat. I'm like, Nick talked about a sexy baby. What? Okay, what? And then I got to it. I was like, oh, this is so gold.
I feel like I've been misrepresented. I think it was a reasonable question to ask. You know what I meant.
Yeah, we did.
What you meant.
I totally got it. It's just like
phrasing, buddy. Phrasing.
Yeah. That's fine.
It's okay, man. I like the amount of crazy shit that just happens to spill out of my mouth because I'm not paying attention or thinking about what I'm saying. Like, I've said much worse, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's no big deal.
It's you understand what he was going for, but you know you can interpret it in a very negative way very easily, and you just want to do it to give him a hard time.
Of course.
Of course. I'm not even like if. Can you objectively say if the baby is going to turn into an attractive person? I guess you can't.
No.
I was going to ask that. Does Van's offspring get a bonus to their stats, or do they just have to roll
the like +6 bonus from charisma?
They should get your charisma bonus to their hotness roll. Yeah. So if your charisma bonus is like 3 or whatever.
I think it's +6 for my reaction adjust.
Oof.
Oh my god, yeah.
So how does that play out when like very charismatic people end up having really ugly babies? Did they just like roll a 3, but the +4 from their charisma brought it up to a 7, so it's just kind of like a semi-ugly person?
Guess so.
We could do 2d6 +6.
Well, clearly the charisma and the hotness are just different roles.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I
think hotness can be part of charisma, but charisma can also be independent of it.
Yeah, I subscribe to the idea.
Flavor of charisma, you know.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I subscribe to the idea of just let people look how they want to look.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like if somebody wants to just have a hot character, that's fine. I don't know. Charisma's a weird stat. I don't like charisma.
I think it's okay because like I can't remember what Kroak's charisma was, but you would say that Kroak was a charismatic character, but he was like his actual description was that he was ugly, right?
Yes, Kroak was meant to be horrifyingly ugly, but I also put a lot of points in charisma. Like, I very, very, very rarely have a character that doesn't have a lot of charisma. I like putting charisma in my characters, regardless of whether or not they're traditionally charismatic. My charisma with Kroak was a 13. Shit, Kroak had good stats. How did we get stats like this?
Yeah,
I mean, I rolled like a 16 and 2 17s, I think. So
there were some good stats in there.
Yeah,
I still remember it. Yeah, I rolled all 10.
I remember I was going to rearrange my stats, and then my rolls were so good that I felt like I'd be doing a disservice. Like Nick got like the most average rolls, and I was like, all right, I can't also rearrange because then I just feel bad.
My character sheet still has the magic daggers on it. I'm so sad I never got to use them. I wanted to at least throw them at her once. I was like, okay, look, can I just die, Neal? But I want to roll these daggers. Like, let me throw them.
I like how the one time Kroak showed a little bit of a heart was when he died.
The funny thing is, okay, so spoilers, but Kroak didn't actually like love her or anything.
Yeah, no, I get that.
My intention was to like show her a good time, romance her, get her on my side, so when I killed her boss, I could offer her job, but just with a new boss. Right? So that when I went adventuring, I would have a right hand that could run things. And I wasn't just like, well, now I'm not adventuring anymore, fam.
That was unfortunate. That was really unfortunate.
I also had like planned out different ways I was going to separate her from her weapons before I talked to her, and then when I actually roleplayed it, I just went like, "Hi, by the way, I killed your boss."
And yet there was no complaining of, well, Krob wouldn't actually have done that because he's been thinking about this plan the whole time, right?
No, because I felt stupid because Greg, had been planning and planning and planning. I had whole scenarios in my brain for if she didn't accept the fact that I'd killed her husband or her shop, whatever the relationship was. And then like I had plans on like how I was going to like physically be between her and her battle axe, or like maybe some copulation might have been in order to get the armor off. Like there were plans, there were backup plans. And then I got to there and I was like, so by the way, I killed your boss. Would you like to work for me? Oh no, you want to kill me? Shit. Like Greg was just as flustered as Krob was. Like, this did not go as planned.
We got so unlucky with the rolls. I can't believe
we really did get super unlucky.
She was only 3rd level, I think. I only needed to roll anything but a double 1.
Right. Yeah, you rolled like double 1s on your sleep, and literally any other roll would have been fine.
Oh well.
You have anything else you want to go over, Greg, in terms of D&D campaign planning stuff, questions?
No, I think we can save anything that we didn't cover. We're probably over time. One of these days, we're gonna have to talk about planning encounters because I see lots of questions on that.
Ooh.
That's another.
I think that's where I'm gonna differ the most from the rest of the group here.
I was torn between character creation and encounter planning because those are the 2 questions I see the most in the advice channel. But I chose character creation basically because of the whole, hey, did anyone recommend me a show thing? And I was like, this needs to be addressed. Maybe I'm in the wrong, but we got to talk about it.
I get the feeling when we get to encounter planning, I'm going to be like, I think I'm going to have I think I'll be the only one on the call who does it the way that I do, in that I actually use encounter balancing.
Were you carefully balance an encounter?
I'm not like super careful or picky about it, because it's not like D&D tried very hard when they were designing the CR system, so it's not like I'm going to try very hard when I design with it. But I think I'm the only one who actually uses it at all. Is the impression I get.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Ryan does.
You don't try and plan the encounters to be.
I'm kind of like, this would be fun. Let's see how they deal with it.
Yeah.
So how does it always, is it just good luck, or how does it always end up so bloody close?
He's trying to kill us, and we're getting by the skin of our teeth.
He's trying to kill us, and we're grudgingly refusing.
As much as I like the idea that it's our skill that's kept us on the edge of the knife the whole time.
And lucky rolls.
Yeah, there have been some lucky rolls, and I don't know,
There's also something to be said for feeling like you got through it by the skin of your teeth, but in reality you probably could have taken a few more rounds or a little bit longer of a beating. There's the like, whoa, we're both down to 10 HP, how do we manage to get through that? But if the battle had continued, like another round of combat probably would have brought someone down to just below 0 or just above 0. So then 2 more rounds of hits would have actually knocked someone out. So that's actually another 2 full rounds of action economy. Like there's a lot of feeling like it was close, when in reality it probably wasn't as close.
Yeah. How much do you try and like balance things mid-fight? So the example that I think about is when we first fought Bokassa in Frofro, and William was dueling him, and I was about to die, like I was losing, and then Greg cast a spell on him, and you had Bokassa basically, rather than attack me and almost certainly kill me, he gave me a back attack and an attack of opportunity, and instead like hit Greg. Now he ended up one-shotting Yaramir.
I think you answered your question.
But sometimes I feel like if things are going really, really bad, maybe like enemies make less optimal decisions. So do you try and like...
I mean, if you want to hold your players' hands and treat them like sissies, that's what you do, but I don't like giving... I don't... I mean, there might be a time and a place for that occasionally, but I think if your victory is handed to you out of like the grace of the gods, then it doesn't feel very satisfying to play through.
Yeah, I get that. But I mean, like in that scenario with Bokassa, like you could it's easy to reasonably justify that he hits Greg instead, because that would make sense. But also, maybe it would have been more optimal to just like finish me off and then still have all this HP.
But like, you got to make a decision, and what is going to be good for the character, and what's going to be good for the players, and what's going to be good for, in this case, like also the viewers and audience. And I think it's fun to have things be more cinematic, more. You get more out of the Bokassa character when he turns and like takes the attack of opportunity, not really worrying about it, and to go fuck up the wizard. Like that's a more interesting
the
moment.
wizard is the one who broke the honor duel.
Yeah, and it shows like personal character rather than just being like, I'm just going to keep doing the thing. I know they're cheating, but I'm just going to fight. Like, it gives you some personality to dig into.
He also took down the crowd control element of the fight too, right? Like,
yeah, I don't think
if I was a part of that fight, it would have been very different.
Yeah, I don't think he made a bad decision.
No,
when
it worked
when
out
he
for him.
Yeah,
But he was basically full on health, and then I think I got a crit on his back attack.
Yeah.
And then I brought the fight basically winnable again.
yeah, I think it's
Maybe he just fucked up, you know.
yeah.
I'm trying to justify how we managed to survive all these crazy situations, but maybe it is just pure luck and.
Well, I think it's
dead.
the story is told by the people who survived. Like, Corny got fucked, right?
That's true.
Kine and Morin fucking dead. Ferris
true.
and Yaromir
I mean, one of them
eventually
hid in a
dead.
bush. You can't be a hero in a bush.
That's true. That's true.
I will give him shit for that forever.
Wait, who hid in the bush?
In the
dwarf.
fight where Morin died.
Oh, Morin, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have these close moments because some of them aren't so close, but then the story is just of the people who had the close moments because they're still around to tell the tale, you know? It's another way of looking at it.
Yeah,
Or
it's
I was
fucking
gonna say, I
DM
don't feel
hacks and
like
I'm
I've
changing the numbers on
survived
the
very
dice.
often.
yeah. Well, I was also gonna say, I feel like
I'm
we've
not saying
also
you change the numbers on the dice.
we've run from some encounters before, right? Like we've seen some encounters and be like, nope,
Oh yeah.
nope, not that
Yeah,
here,
we're
and then
smart
just
enough to do
left.
that. That's true.
So
Go
I think
get
it's-
the hair from a giant, and you guys are like, no. Just no. That was fun. I planned a nice encounter for that. It was going to be
The
all...
good news is you still have all that prep. You can run it sometime later.
It was going to be all Odysseus in the cave. You know, and you gotta like sneak up and steal the giant's hair when he's not paying attention, or like disguise yourself underneath his little flock of sheep, something like that. And
that would have worked out. It would have woke up and somebody would have got like just obliterated in one hit.
Oh yeah,
And you would have loved it at the time, because at the time you were like, this whole show, everyone's gonna die with it.
and it's also the Tether Wilds, and we had talked about, like, I was going, hey, what's in the Tether Wilds, and it was like, oh, every bad thing imaginable is in the Tether Wilds.
yeah.
There's a great bit. I can't remember exactly where it is, but you used to that quite often, like ask the sage like what monsters are in the wilderness around here.
Yep.
And the guy just lists like an endless list of
I know what you're talking about.
things.
The like, oh, there's giant spiders. There's the
Yeah.
rock sometimes goes flying through. I'm just like, excuse me, friend, what the fuck?
That was so funny. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Can I ask more questions about the demon run thing now, or not?
Go for it.
Let's
see what we got.
If one of the smaller groups lose and get overrun, is
Well,
that going to destroy the whole thing, regardless of whether?
what happens if one of the crystals breaks?
Yeah, exactly. I know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. That's
Oh
why
my
these
God.
demon run battles are so
Guys.
fucking important.
So
And it's going to be run by NPCs.
NPCs.
Shenanigans.
Jesus Christ.
We're giving the fate of the world to the shenanigans crew. I mean, I imagine if one of the crystals falters, it's probably going to make the barrier start to falter, and we'll have to do some emergency patching. But I doubt like one of the groups failing is going to like screw us over immediately.
Well, you have one backup crystal, right?
We do.
Yeah.
So if one of them goes down,
We'll probably
and
see the barrier start
goes
to
down,
shimmer.
then
Well, I imagine the barrier is going to start to shimmer, and then we have to like emergency hot swap the crystal that went down.
Sure, but like for some reason, maybe your battle takes a month to play out for some time warp reasons or whatever. Like if the barrier is temporarily down, that doesn't really change anything. It was just brought up, right? So the demons
true.
at the edge might be able to get out as long as you can replace the crystal before like the whole horde leaves. It'll be sort of maybe fine. But if
Yeah,
two
that's
crystals go down, then you guys are fuckity fucked.
And we are.
So we've
Yeah,
got
probably.
we've got some room. But then again, if the barrier goes down and then some demons do escape, now that they know you're trying to contain them, it could have a whole different slew of problems, you know?
Yeah,
maybe
and
they
if
make
we
a new
do
base or a new
if we
encampment or
do
something.
lose the fight in the canyon, it doesn't matter. We're all fucked anyways.
Right.
We are actually fucked, right? Because we haven't got any of the usual methods to escape. Like, I might be able to go invisible.
Oh, Van's probably not going to run
Canyon.
from this one. I don't think. I think Van will probably just die.
Shit.
Venturing to his last.
Luckily, our souls should escape because we're out of the boundary of the flesh, so I don't think it can suck up our souls. I think we're good on that part.
Yeah, if they don't eat you before you die.
Mm-hmm.
You just gotta stab yourself. Do the good old other side strat and stab yourself with your sword.
Fall on your sword. Oh my god.
Does anyone else want to bring anything up or suggest anything?
None of us do another 40 minutes talking about encounter preparations.
Probably not quite.
Or charisma.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to bounce again.
What do you got to say about charisma, Ryan?
No, I was joking. Sean said he could rant about it for an hour
I
and a
see.
half or something.
Well then, why don't we wrap it up and stop with the pre-show, and we'll start the real show on the other side of our break. So we'll see you guys for the real show in about 5 minutes. Bye, everybody.
Such a troll.
I was waiting for you guys to
God.
say goodbye.
Bye.
What a massive troll.
Say goodbye.
Bye. I thought you were just gonna hard cut to break.
See you guys in 5 minutes.
I thought you were legitimately gonna just end it there, which would have been amazing.